Thank you. It was. I can hear.
We got them through their.
Well, like, I mean,
Oh my God.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the regular Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of Wednesday, February the 7th. My name is Ian Morrison. I'm the chair of the Electoral Area Services Committee. Can you hear me now? I think we're at max, so you're going to have to tune your ear to me as best you can. I'd like to begin by recognizing that the CVRD is on unceded territories of the Cowichan, Malahat, Subasat, Halalt, Penelakut, Staminas, Liaxin, Pakwachin, Ditidot, and Pachidot nations, whose people have walked here gently for thousands of years. Just before we get underway, I like to ask everyone to either mute or turn off your electronic devices and begin with ensuring that everyone here is, this is a safe space for not only the elected officials, but we want it to be a safe space for all of you that have come to share input with us today and to engage in our process here. So with that, I'd just like to acknowledge that those of you that have taken time out of your day to come and provide input to us, and your input here is always welcome. I want to start by acknowledging this is a little unusual today, but for space, we have a number of our municipal directors that are joining us at the table today. We have Director Staples, Director Istash, Director Justice, and Director Stone. And while they are at the table with us today, they won't be participating or voting in any of the items before the committee. This is your Electoral Area Services Committee made up of electoral area directors. I do believe we have Director Acton is the only director that is appearing remotely. Welcome, Director Acton. I'd like to also note that we have received some correspondence that has been re-downloaded to the website and to the agenda, and I want to thank those that took the time to send correspondence in directly. And with that, I will turn to Mr. Robbins.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrick Robbins. I'm the corporate officer, and so I'm here as the committee's parliamentarian. First item on the agenda is the approval of that agenda, and there are a couple of amendments. One, the deletion of R3, the report from Utilities Division with regards to the Cameron Farms inclusion into the Arbutus Ridge Water System Service Area request. Staff had requested that you delete that so that we could provide additional information to that report. And adding 2 items under C3 correspondence pertaining to item R2, report from the Development Services Division with regards to application number ALR 23D01. And with that, a motion to approve as amended.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Mr. Robbins.
Second item of business, recommendation that the minutes of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of January 17, 2024 be adopted.
Moved, seconded. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Mr. Robbins.
Nothing under the business arising from those minutes. Moves you to public input period. And the public input period is to offer the public an opportunity to comment on an agenda item before the committee considers that item. The public input period procedure policy allows for an allotment of 15 minutes where the speaker is welcome to comment on any items of the agenda to a maximum of 3 minutes. Keeping in mind, this excludes items that are or have been the subject of public hearing. And just a reminder to those in the gallery, please, comments are to be presented in a polite, calm, courteous manner, using respectful language, civility, and decorum. We want to make sure that this is a safe place for everybody who wishes to express themselves today. And with that, Mr. Chair, you might want to call for anybody that would like to provide some input, and they can come up to the lectern. And
Just before we go there, I just want to perhaps set the table just a little bit so that everyone's clear on the agenda item that's before committee today. We are a referral agency or a conduit for Agricultural Land Commission applications, and the request that has been sent to us is one that's fairly narrow in scope, and it's in regards to the project that's being proposed, and is it consistent with our current zoning regulations and policies that are on the books today? So that will be the scope of deliberation amongst the committee when we get to that item. I should note that while it's noted as R2 in the agenda, we will, due to the interest of everyone, we will be bumping it up to be the first item that we consider. And with that, I have talked to a number of people in the gallery already. As Mr. Robbins had indicated, we have 15 minutes allocated or allotted to the public input period. I've already taken 8 names from individuals that have indicated a desire to speak and provide input to the committee. So we will go through that list as I have them here and go to the full extent of the 15 minutes. I will note that we have the ability, upon recommendation or upon the motion of one of the committee members, to extend the public input period, but only extend it once. So another 15 minutes is the maximum that it could be extended beyond the initial 15-minute period. And with that, I would invite, I've got Sue Kaufman was the first on my list, so I would welcome Ms. Kaufman to come up to the, Director Martman.
So in light that we have 8 and 3 minutes, it's 24 minutes when I do my math. So I'd like to just move that we extend it once at this point.
Okay, that requires a 2/3 vote to approve. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? It's in order. Call all in favor. Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. So we have a maximum of 30 minutes allotted for discussion. I said I've got 8 on, and I know that there's a number of people that are in the back that had indicated a desire to provide input to the committee. So at this point, I see your hand up, but at this point, I've got to proceed with the procedures that we have as a committee have. When we've gone through the list that I've already taken, we will open up the lectern for any others that would like to provide additional input. So with that, Ms. Kaufman, please, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and all the directors, including the municipal directors that are joining us today. I would like to speak to R7, the housing statutes, Bill 44 that the province has put forward. And while I'm generally in favor of them, I am concerned that a referral to the APCs is not recommended at this time, and it seems to be a result of time constraints. And I believe that the CVRD was in possession of this material in November, and it was voted upon in December to send it to the APCs, but that unfortunately didn't happen. I think the public in a lot of ways is beginning to feel a little. If we can pause for a moment, please. Thank you.
We'll shoot you another 15 seconds. How's that sound?
Okay. I hear from people not only in our area, but also in the major centers that the public is beginning to feel a little disenfranchised from the process of land use decisions. And really, our voice when it comes to our OCPs is being diminished at all levels. And one thing that was brought to me was people were saying, why hasn't there been some pushback on these very restrictive legislation?
I guess I owe you about 30 seconds now. Go ahead.
Thank you. The legislation that's being put forward, and I don't think that it sounds, although there's some exemptions for regional districts, we are a very different form of local government. We don't have control over our own roads. That rests with the province. We don't have the control on the septic or the water. And people are really concerned about environmental changes and how it's going to impact our communities and whether or not our rural areas that rely on wells can sustain a lot of extra people. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I think I would hope that at some point that this would be referred to the APCs as a point of education for our APC members, because then we can go out to the community and talk to the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. And for those of you that may be new here, she just about nailed it to the second as far as 3 minutes goes. If a person's up here and is providing input to us, and I should remind everyone that this is your opportunity to provide input. There won't be any, if you pose a question, we won't be answering any questions during this public input period. But if you're nearing the end, I've got the timer here and you've got some lights at the lectern that will indicate when your time has run out. If I do interject, I will ask you to complete your thought or your sentence and then make room for the next person to come up. So with that, I would invite Jack McLeod up to the lectern next.
Good afternoon, Chair and Directors. Be patient with me. I've never spoke.
Fair enough. And could you pull the microphone in front of you and stand in front of, yeah, perfect. Thank you.
And I'm here with land keepers, and I want to talk about Nature's Trust and the application to the ALC. And so I want to go over a few points to make you all aware of what's transpired towards Nature's Trust and their application. First of all, I want to talk to you about, there was never a public consultation. Tom Reed stated there was. They talked to two property owners at Locksmiths Road, one piece of property owned by Mike Kelly and Marty Block, the other piece of property owned by Brian Sales and his siblings. Never did Nature's Trust talk to the South Cowichan Lawn Tennis Court, which was been on the site for over 100 years, nor did they speak to any other owners in residence along Cowichan Bay Road or Zuhalem Road, road properties adjacent to the farm. Land keepers first learned about the flooding in June 8th, 2023, as a Citizen newspaper, when we were all totally shocked at what was happening in the area. Land Keepers was incorporated in July 3rd, 2023, to address the concerns of the project. Land Keepers called a town hall meeting on August 14th at the hub to make people in the valley aware as to what was happening. I'm going to go over this time.
Then
There's
I'm
no
going to have to
question.
ask you to come back after your 3 minutes are done.
Okay, I'll
then.
go into the end. Okay,
So you've got a minute, 20 seconds still.
okay. So was asked to come to, pardon me. So we had a meeting on August 14th at the hub to make the people aware of the valley, what was happening in Cowichan Bay. Invitations were sent out to all CVR directors and local MP, Alistair McGregor. A couple of directors showed up, plus Alistair. One director sent a reply to Land Keepers on August 15th. That's the day after the town hall meeting, and declined our invitation. Also, these words were written in her email. This is not a CVRD matter. This is not true. We have emails to and from the bureaucrats, namely Brian Farquhar, Kate Miller, and Jeff Moore, to Tom Reed of Nature's Trust, dated May 13, 2022, May 18, 2022, May 24, 2022, May 25, 2022, which shows that the CVRD has been involved for some time. One of the emails, Tom Reed states, "I would appreciate this attachment being kept confidential at this time." And I'm going to have to do the rest later because I don't have enough time.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. I will, can I ask everyone,
Pardon me?
folks, I please ask that you refrain from applause, calling out. We want everyone here, whether they be supportive of Mr. McLeod or others who may have opposing views, to feel safe, to feel that they can get up and express what they want to express. So I'm going to ask that you've already been told no placards in the room, and ask that you be respectful of everyone here, even those that may have opposing views. So with that, I'll put your name on the list. I will see about, do you know how much time you've got left? Maybe one of your group might yield some time
Well, I
to
have
you.
about the same amount of time left, so if I could speak after the meeting,
Okay, well,
that would be fine.
we'll call you back up towards the
Great,
end there.
thank you very
Okay.
much.
With that, I will go to Nigel Dinsdale next.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. I think this whole issue here, I think I want to put a little history to it, and I'll try and be as short as I can. I've lived there since 1965, and that farm has been farmed since before Confederation in 1871. And my mom and dad, who are gone now, would roll over in the grave if they understood that what the farm was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a farm, and it's been over there for 100 years farming. And it's iconic farmland. It's the best farmland in the province. And it's hard for me to stand here as my mom's son and understand that we got to the state where we're going to knock the dikes down and destroy some of the best farm in the province, given that we already talk about, and all of these people in this room speak about looking after agriculture in the province. There's not enough land the way there is now. There's not enough food growing capacity the way there is now. And we continue to pound away on the farmers, and it's just not fair. Now, that whole deal was structured because my mom, the dikes were going to flood, and she had 3 boys to look after, a mortgage to pay, and a farm to run, and no money. And when the Nature Trust came and Ducks Unlimited came, they offered her a deal. And they didn't, and when they offered her a deal, they knew darn well that she was up against it. Okay? And she tried to make it so that we could keep that farm for 50 years till 2040. And that was the deal in good faith that she signed. And I was there at the kitchen table when that happened. And I can't believe today that morally we can even break that deal. And I understand the legalities of it all, but it's still shocking to me. And I just want to say that we need to look after the farmers. And my mom and my dad were farmers for most of their life there. And I just can't believe that we're going to roll that over and talk about doing that, given the history of whatever it is. And I believe that Ducks Unlimited Nature Trust are morally bankrupt if they're going to do that kind of stuff, given what they said to my mom and me at the kitchen table. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dinsdale. Reset the clock, and I'd invite Ruth Waddell up next. Welcome.
There, sorry. My name's Ruth Waddell, and I'm a property owner, shareholder in the regional district, and I've been here for over 40 years. The corporate-private shareholders partnerships that have been established over the years are keeping the public excluded from having a voice. We're here today to be heard, and we have questions. I have questions, and I know you're not going to answer them now, but you need to hear our questions. Where can I find the regional district report addressing how the current floodwaters from the west will behave once a barrier is installed that will prevent the flow from the Coquesala River floods from breaching over Cowichan Bay and dispersing over the Dinsdale farmlands as they do presently? Based on the flood risk assessment report, flood protection measures are required to protect the properties north of Loch Menace Road. Where can I find the regional district assessment report on the other nearby properties to the west, including designated Heritage Lawn Tennis Club property, Cowichan Bay Road properties, and the Zoo Halem Road properties? Where can I find the regional district report on the risk of impact to the nearby 80 wells, aquifers numbered 186, 188, 197, and 198, the Kidwell and the Coquesala River regarding seawater and freshwater interface, migration inward and seawater intrusion? Considering the local crisis being experienced due to climate change that is affecting groundwater and aquifers, what guarantee will the regional district make that the above-mentioned critical water sources will not be compromised? Protecting groundwater is recommended in the Western Water Association January 2023 report. How far into the proposed saltwater marsh will the source protection area for the Kidwell be protected, and how will this be achieved? Saltwater intrusion can result in the need for water utilities to increase treatment, relocate water intakes, or develop alternate sources of fresh water. Given the risk of saltwater intrusion, who will be responsible for mitigating this impact on water sources? Has the regional district collected baseline water samples from nearby existing wells and water sources? And who will be responsible for ongoing monitoring and sample collection? And what will this interval be? I foresee a significant personal liability being assumed by the elected directors if due diligence is not followed prior to the application approval. The taxpayer should not be on the hook for costs of damage and reparation when we've had no say in the project. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. And with that, I will go to, I have Adriana Richards next. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, Chair and Directors. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Citizens Oversight and Accountability Project, whose large membership is vehemently against the flooding of this productive farmland that supplies 3 dairy farms in the region, and of which is quite unique as it does not need watering, and it gets fertilizer from the river and the ocean when it rises over the land during the winter. We saw farmers' water being shut off last year, causing them to lose their 3rd crop of hay and being forced to import hay from the interior, which is far from environmentally sound. And here we are having an NGO with over $178,000 in asset coming to our region to destroy a hay farm that could supply hay in times of water shortage, which would address your climate mitigation plans. We understand that you have been asked to write a letter to ALC on behalf of Nature Trust so they may continue on their plan to flood the 170 acres of farmland in Cowichan Bay. From a FOIA request, we found that CVRD staff have been in on this plan for quite a while possibly the area directors did not know anything about it. The data provided for the reasoning is far from sound science, with unprovable models around supposed sea level rise, unprovable data about certain grasses being restored, and some wishful utopia where the land is flooded and somehow a plentiful shellfish garden blooms for local indigenous to harvest from. The reality is shellfish are contaminated from the sewer transfer station. We're trading productive farmland, which, by the way, was promised to the original seller by Nature's Trust to be kept in perpetuity until 2040, for unproductive farmland. Nature Trust is quite happy to take $3 million to flood the farmland from the feds and the province, when maintaining the dikes would cost $9 million. Rewilding land is being pushed on farmers all over the world, with NGOs swooping in to call themselves stewards of the land while cashing in big time. Farmers are being targeted globally. There's hundreds of thousands of farmers right now in the UK who have stopped working and are descending on their governments because of policies like these. Your own agricultural plan on one hand supports food sustainability, while on the other hand demonizes farmers' emissions. COPE has been on the Zooms where young white UBC students paint some picture of First Nations being able to harvest the grass and shellfish and try to pull on your white guilt heartstrings. Don't buy into it. These NGOs are very well funded and have ties internationally, as do the NGOs here, like Transition Cowichan and Climate Hub. No one voted for your public-private partnerships. Your voters voted for public-to-public partnerships. And the more you create suffering and lack of food security through your possibly misguided votes, the only people who will be held liable are you. With food shortages worldwide due to these types of policies, let us show the world how we are protecting our farmers and our farmland, especially when we only have 3 days of food on store shelves in the event of a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and input. And with that, I will go to Joyce Benson, please. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair and Directors and Councillors. So I am speaking to R2, which is very much to do with the proposed destruction of our very valued farmland. My one point is that there was no consultation with adjacent landowners as is reported on the Nature Trust website. My husband and I own the front 3 acres of the Dinsdale farm right beside the Cooksila River and Bridge. We've had it for 5 years. I lived at Mrs. Dinsdale's home when she moved out in '93. I moved in for 5 years, loved the farm. And we use it as food production. That is our goal. We have a plan to set up a greenhouse, but we already provide food locally as a farm gate. We were never approached, never consulted, and wonder why. So we also first heard about this destructive proposal on the front page of the Citizen June the 8th, and we're in shock. And I just want to say that my biggest issue and concern have always been for the Cowichan Bay Estuary, sewage outfall. The Cowichan River sewage lagoons on the Heritage Cowichan River, the Joint Utility Board, goes down into and out. The outfall is Cowichan Bay, has been for many years. That's the real cause of contamination of the Cowichan Bay, of the sea life, including salmon. So there's a report in the province on January the 21st. Microplastics from laundry harm zooplankton, reducing food source for fish. And it says right here that the microfibers that shed from washing clothes can harm or even kill zooplankton, reducing a food source for many types of fish, including salmon, according to a new study by OceanWise and the University of BC, and also SFU, Simon Fraser University, did a study on microplastics and reported on that only a few years ago. So my concern is, why is the issue destroying a beautiful estuary where people go all the time for recreation, bird watching, wildlife watching? I mean, all you have to do is go to Cowichan Bay and Friends Facebook page and you see it daily. It is a well-loved, well-enjoyed area, but more importantly, as we've already heard, that the farmland is crucial to our local farming industry. And just back to the sewage outfall, that when if dikes were to be removed, in fact, it'll be a bigger, broader expanse of the sewage outfall covering the entire estuary, whereas at this time, it's somewhat directed in one area out of the Cowichan River side. Now, what is proposed is to flood the whole area with our sewage, which also includes human pharmaceuticals and the microfibers and microplastics. to me, that's the issue that our local governments and province and feds should be really focusing on, not just pipe the poop to and through Cowichan Bay and out further to Satellite Channel for better flushing action. My concern also was, having been at the agricultural show this past weekend, speaking to a young farmer, and he said to me, we've taken the first for 5 years, we've taken the first 3 crops off of that farmland at the estuary, and he said it glowingly, and I thought, that's our future farmers as well as our existing ones. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Benson. Next on the list is Jane Kilty.
I live in Cowichan Bay overlooking the estuary. I'm here to speak in support of the Cowichan Estuary Restoration Project. I was a longtime board member of the Cowichan Land Trust and led their initiative to establish the Cowichan Estuary Nature Center to raise awareness about this vital ecosystem. I've participated in many eelgrass restorations with Sea Change and Cowichan tribes, and years ago I was privileged to be at a table hosted by Cowichan tribes with Nature Trust and tribes biologists. Part of the conversation was about the looming need to address the acceleration of impacts of climate on the estuary and the risk to salmon populations and migratory birds in the watershed, and what would happen if we didn't act. I learned how lucky we are that the geography of the Lower Cowichan is one that can support this process of recovery. Many estuaries can't. This project is essential to the health and well-being of the Cowichan and Coxsila watersheds, the people and the nature. It's been in the works for many years. When settlers first arrived here in our valley, reclaiming land from the sea, they did not know the impacts it would have and the challenges we would face now. It wasn't their fault, and we need to act. Yes, we need to protect farmland in our valley. That's why it's so important to have urban containment boundaries and look at soil types, and I'm a supporter of local food, and we urgently need to protect our estuary and our watersheds. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. And just looking at the time here, I've got Kate McDonald as the next speaker up, and I had indicated to Mr. McLeod that we would try and get him back in for round 2, but we'll hear from Kate McDonald first, and then we will, is Kate here wanting to come up? Please come up to the lectern, and you have 3 minutes.
Do I have to do that? No. Just a side note to something. Hay is now $35 a bale on the island, just so you all know that, because they didn't get their last cuts out. Now, I find it very interesting that they are now trying to get that property out of the ALR after the fact. They're trying to sneak that through. They made all the plans just assuming they'd be able to do it without doing this step. So it's kind of funny they're doing it retroactively. And just so you know who we're dealing with here, I mean, all these environmental groups started off, with good intentions, probably with really good people. But the BC branch of Nature's Trust, they're funded first and foremost by the government, federal government. And then the BC one, their partners are Wheaton Precious Metals Corporation, Endeavour Silver Corporation. These are 2 of the biggest mining corporations around. BMO, TK, one of the world's largest marine energy, transportation, storage, and production companies. Fasken Martineau, one of the largest law firms in BC. How convenient for them. And then the chair, the guy who runs it, his name is Peter R.B. Armstrong, and he owns Major Rock Property Investment Development and Holdings Company. Now, do these people sound like environmental fans to you? It sounds a little bit insidious. They're all into mining, real estate, investment. There's nothing environmental about it. It's all it's all about finance and wealth. Like, you really, this took me 10 minutes to find this out on my way here. Like, just do some research, find out who you're dealing with.
Thank you for your input. And just looking at, we could, Mr. McLeod, you had a good 3 or 4 minutes left still to complete your remarks. If you could wrap it up, I'd like to give some of the folks, or at least one of the folks in the audience, an opportunity to, actually, can I ask you to step, there's a gentleman who's been right behind you patiently waiting for a few minutes. I'd like to take an opportunity to hear his remarks, and then I'll let you finish up.
Yeah, no. Go ahead.
I prepared a written submission in case I didn't get through.
So you've provided a written submission to us already?
Well, I just gave it to my regional director rep at the beginning, so
okay.
I haven't done. Anyway, so I'm an enthusiastic naturalist and conservationist, and I've worked on conservation projects as paid and volunteer capacity. I've given talks on behalf of conservation groups. Like many ecology and conservation-minded people, I'm a supporter of local food production. We have here some productive farmland. I do agree that it is a likely source of some of the pollution in the bay, because I can smell what they put on when they're fertilizing the ground. It would seem reasonable to put in place a conservation farming agreement, whereby in order to reduce polluting runoff, the farmer would reduce the inputs and receive a sum to compensate him for the reduction in yield. Such agreements are in place elsewhere and are not hard to work out. If, however, after all the pros and cons of swamping this farmland are weighed, it is decided that it really is the best thing to do, then use some sense and leave the walking trail on the dike. Make breaches in the dike to let the water through and put bridges over them to enable continued use. This is shown to work well on the nearby industrial road. There are signs to tell us how effective this is in restoring former fields back to marsh. This would cost a lot less, and the reduction in excavator and trucking time in removing all that material would mean less disturbance to the wildlife in the estuary. The money saved could be used to good effect, to save threatened habitat elsewhere. In my view, if the Nature Trust has this money available, it would be better spent saving threatened habitat than trying to resurrect habitat that was lost 100 years ago. There is much promotion by local governments of the benefits of outdoor recreation, and it makes absolutely no sense to take out one of the most popular walking trails in the whole district. There are frequently more than 20 cars parked there. The nearby industrial road is fine on weekends when the plant is closed and walkers can use the road, but the signs instruct walkers to stay on the trail, which is not big enough to accommodate the extra numbers safely. You cannot safely pass some of the dogs that are there, even when they are on a leash. The trail is so narrow. So if one trail goes, the other needs significant improvement, and if it is to be improved and widened, that can only be done by clearing the wonderful hedges, which are excellent habitat for so many birds all year round and would be a significant loss. So the next trail is the Blackley Dyke Trail, started by the Cowichan River Bridge and going out to the sawmill. This car park is already inadequate, it's actually dangerous, and needs work on it, without doubling or tripling or more the number of cars that are going to be wanting to park there if you take away Maple Grove Trail. Will the CVRD do something about that? Or can you get Nature Trust to do that if they are destroying the other one? That concludes my remarks.
Thank you very much for your input. And Jack Cloud, I will turn the floor over to you. You've got a few minutes to wrap up, and you will be our concluding presenter. So please go ahead.
Good, thank you. So I'd like to continue on here. I have two letters that were delivered to or sent to Brian Sales. He's the gentleman at the end of the road. Written by Chanel Crafton from the Senior Regional Special Water and Dike Safety and Deputy Inspector of Dikes. I asked Brian, did you write these letters? The answer was no. I asked Brian, did you sign these letters? Pardon me. I asked Brian, do you have any engineering experience? He says no. I asked Brian, did you sign these letters? He could not tell me for sure, but believed he did sign. I asked Brian, do you have signing authority to sign these letters? His answer was no. These letters were written by the Deputy Dyke, Chantel Grafton, to send back to her stating Brian agreed with the terms of the letters. These letters were also CC'd to Tom Reed. So if you don't understand what I'm saying, the Dyke people sent the letters to Brian, have him sign the letters that they wrote, and send it back to the Dyke people to say that they could tear down the dikes. So the next thing is John Emery is from Nature's Trust, and he's quoted that the sea level storm could eventually flood the farm, even with the dikes in place. John Emery, or Jason, I should say, Jason stated that the land could be flooded if the dikes did not get repaired or replaced. It could cost up to $9 million. So the question is, to remove these dikes receiving $1.5 million from the provincial government and $1.5 from the federal government, to remove the dikes is very attractive rather than spending, as Jason states, $9 million. I would like to mention also, under new insurance policy, it states that any change to man-made structures intentionally by civil authorities breaching dikes, levees, or dams will not be covered by your insurance policy. For all those people around there that have property, they take that dike down, you don't have any insurance. That's just as simple as it is. I would like the directors to take some time and think about what you heard today before you make any decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. And with that, our time has run out.
1 minute. 1 minute.
What's the will of the committee? Hang on. I haven't granted you the lectern yet. So our time has expired. I'm going to turn to my committee. The time has expired by 3 minutes already. So I'm just going to turn to the committee and see if there's a motion to allow one more speaker. Moved. Is there a seconder? Okay. Moved and seconded. This requires 2/3 vote. Okay.
On just the one speaker.
On just the one speaker.
Yeah, fair enough.
We've already extended the period once, and it will require 2/3 vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, go ahead. You have.
Acton opposed.
Thank you. My name is David Pink. I've lived in the Cowichan Valley for 55 years, most of my life on a farm. And when I graduated from high school in 1976, the Vancouver Island produced 79% of its own food. We now produce less than 6%. And half of that goes to dairy farms for their cows to make dairy. We can't afford to give up any other farmland. And the reason I really wanted to speak is there's another piece of farmland between the mill and the Dinsdale farm on 5155 Samuel Road. And my wife and I farmed that land. Previously, it was farmed by John and Katie Ehrlich. And it is the most incredibly productive land there is anywhere in that estuary. You literally drop a seed in the ground and come back a week later and you can harvest it. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but that's what it's like. We cannot afford to give up any other farmland. That's all I have to say. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you. So with that, I turn to Mr. Robbins. We've got a couple of items to address before we get to this item on the agenda. So
Correct.
What's the next item?
There's 5 pieces of correspondence. The first one, C1, is a grant and aid request, Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, with regards to RCMSAR 34 Marine Rescue Society, a request for $1,000 grant and aid.
Turn to the director for the area. Moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries.
And C2 is a grant and aid in Electoral Area I, Yubo Mead Creek, with regards to Lake Cowichan School.
Director Deck, would you be moving this item? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries.
And then correspondence C3, and they added at the beginning of the agenda C4 and C5 are for your information, and they are pieces of information with regards to item R2.
Okay, everybody, any questions on those information items? Seeing none, next item, Mr. Robbins.
Is Electoral Area C Cobble Hill Advisory Planning Commission minutes of January 25, 2024, again for your information.
It's for information. I actually did have a question in there that I think staff might be able to answer, but it's just, I'll put it in the minutes. There's a reference to the APC requesting or making reference to a form and character development permit request that it come back to them, and we don't see development permits, so I was just a little curious as to how that fits into our process. And is there, staff can give me some explanation on that?
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the proposal that comes forward, if there are development permit requirements involving or that speak to form and character guidelines, those could be referred to the APC at that time, and that would be handled at the staff level.
Okay, so if we receive these minutes that have a reference to the APC requesting that form and character, a referral for form and character come back through them, then staff would either decide or not as to whether or not that referral would be made?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robbins, next we go to, I believe, that was an information item. Any other discussion on that item? We go to reports, and we're bringing forward R2 for consideration at this point.
That's
Mr.
right.
Robbins.
R2 is a report from Development Services Division with regards to application ALR 23D01, which is at 2279 Cowichan Bay Road. There is a two-part recommendation, and I understand, just looking to see who's on WebEx, but there are four people joining you via WebEx as well that are representing the application, and staff have a bit of presentation for you as well.
Which staff is presenting this for us?
Chair Morrison, that would be myself, Ponder Davina.
Oh, there you are.
Actually.
You popped up on my
Yes.
screen. Ms. Davina, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So this application before you is for a non-farm use application in the Agricultural Land Reserve, or ALR, that would decommission 450 meters of Dike 49 on the subject properties. While this proposal is part of the broader Cowichan Estuary Restoration Project to improve the overall health of the estuary, this non-farm use application focuses solely on the 450 meters of dike area in the ALR. Please, yeah, thanks. Just hold it there on the slide. Thank you. So the project also proposes to transition from commercial agricultural production to revitalizing Indigenous food systems with partnering First Nations to continue farming and food production on the land. Non-farm use applications in the ALR must first be reviewed by the local government, who can choose to either authorize the application to proceed to the Agricultural Land Commission for decision with or without comments, or prevent the application from proceeding to the ALC for decision. In accordance with the CVRD ALR applications policy, non-farm use applications will only be forwarded to the ALC for decision if the proposed non-farm use complies with CVRD bylaws. So the Official Community Plan, or OCP, recognizes the cultural and ecological importance of the Cowichan Estuary and includes policies that support restoration of priority ecological areas, that protect and restore environmentally sensitive aquatic habitats, that permit modifications to environmentally sensitive areas to increase resilience to sea level rise, and that increase local food security. This proposal is consistent with permitted uses in the Area D zoning bylaw number 3705, as agriculture, environmental protection, restoration and enhancement, and flood control works undertaken by a government agency are all permitted uses in the A1 zone. So in accordance with the CVRD ALR applications policy, to only forward non-farm use applications that are consistent with CVRD bylaws, staff are recommending the application be forwarded to the ALC with the comments that it is consistent with both the OCP and zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeBenna. I look to directors. Are there any questions for staff? Director Bartman.
Thank you, staff, or Ms. DeBenna. Question I have is there was comment made about a deal when the land was purchased. Is there any covenants or anything that would be in writing for that?
Thank you, Director Markman, through the chair. There's no covenants to that respect registered on title.
Does that conclude your remarks? Okay. Excuse me. This is now in the hands of committee for discussion. The public input period has concluded. So this will be discussion with with staff, or there may be additional questions put forward to the applicant. I don't know at this point. It's the will of the committee. So I would ask that you respect this body and allow us to do our work. That's what we're here to do. And with that, I would turn to directors and pose the question. Are there any additional questions to staff on this matter? Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know you just made reference to additional questions for the proponents. How would that be handled if we, as this moves forward, we would have to have them here?
So we're going to follow our normal procedure. I've asked for questions for staff at this point, and then when we've concluded with questions to staff, I will ask if the applicant has anything that they would like to add, and if directors have any questions that they would like to pose to the applicants who are joining us online.
Good. Thank you very much.
So I look to committee members. Are there any further questions for staff at this point? Seeing none, I would turn to the applicants that have joined us via WebEx. Are there any points, comments that you would like to make in addition to the material provided by the staff in the staff report? Okay, I don't have a name there.
Yeah, sorry,
Tom,
it's
Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to recognize that we're joined with the proponents with Cowichan Tribes is also joining us, as is Jared Williams, who is also involved in the project from a food security and revitalization component. So with this application overall, as the staff report indicates, is for that portion of the dike that is within the ALR. And with the majority of the dike is outside of the ALR, and that's been authorized for decommissioning through the Dike Maintenance Act by the Inspector of Dikes. One thing I do want to add is that the land is not being removed from the ALR. We still are focused on community resilience, food security, food revitalization in partnership with Cowichan Tribes, and at the same time looking at the overall health of the estuary in terms of fish and wildlife habitat. And so there still is a large component of this project that is focused on food production and food security, and it's changing what's being farmed right now on that site, but it still will be supporting the overall community food sustainability and overall estuary resilience.
Thank you, Tom. I'm just going to stop for a second here. It's now time for the committee to do its business, and I appreciate that there's passion and intensity amongst people that have joined us in the gallery today. But I would very respectfully ask that if you feel the need to remark or make comments, that you please get up and leave the room. It's very hard for the directors here to give due care and attention to the remarks that are coming through, are being made here and online. So I respectfully ask that you allow us to do the business that we're here to do, and cease remarks in the gallery. And if you desperately feel the need to make remarks, that you please get up and leave the room. With that, Mr. Reed, anyone else in your group have any additional remarks to make to committee while we're considering this matter?
Yeah, I'd like to invite if Jared from Cowichan Tribes or if the other members from Cowichan Tribes would like to add anything regarding this project.
Okay, who do we have online? Jared, Jared, I recognize you. Go ahead.
Siab Nissia Ainta Walmosne Chquistednachan, Hitzel La Lemechan at Walmos Ashlinsi at Walmoklakan. Hello, everybody. I think what I really want to highlight here is that we've had to hear from everybody else about this land being utilized to produce food, and absolutely this is highly productive land as a result of generations of indigenous inhabitants intentionally looking after the land to be able to produce food. So I'm really happy that it was being utilized by who was utilizing it, but now we need to really look at long term. As we've also heard highlighted here, in the last 50 years, we've dropped from a high rate of food security on the island to a very low rate. And what I'd like to highlight here is that prior to contact, we produced 100% of what we ate. And we produced 100% of what we ate in a result of using land like this land. So what we're trying to do here is to reintegrate indigenous food systems. As an example, I think we heard highlighted here earlier about utilizing grasses. I just really want to try to highlight that whoever used that doesn't really realize what we're referencing when we're using indigenous foods here. So the New World doesn't really understand how we ate because they've been utilizing it, non-indigenous foods on these lands since they arrived. So what we're trying to reintroduce is a genetically unique form of camas that was utilized here for thousands of years and is a highly productive food crop that once reintroduced could utilize this land in its original state as a saltwater wetland. And we're not only trying to rehabilitate salmon and shellfish, which are incredibly vital as well, but also reintroducing and reutilizing indigenous vegetables. And so I also work on the Indigenous Advisory Council to the Ministry of Agriculture, where we are working directly to try to ensure that indigenous foods can be represented within the ALR. And so as we've already heard, we don't need to remove it directly from the ALR, as we are going to be trying to produce food on this land. And so lastly, I just want to highlight that a lot of the work I've actually been working on recently is trying to get indigenous foods into the institutions that we utilize across the province, like hospitals and education institutions, because when we're in these institutions, we can access Western foods. We can even access specific foods like vegetarian, all these other options, but we don't often get the option to eat indigenous foods here. And so what's happening is there is a growing movement of the institutions looking to acquire and utilize indigenous foods, and this could be an excellent way for our community to reintegrate using these indigenous foods, utilizing them, and even potentially turning it into an economic resource as well as environmental rehab for our area. So, that's all I wanted to highlight here today.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. So with that, I would turn to committee members as to if there are any questions for the applicants. Yeah, I see that. Hang on, just got two different things going on here. Is there anyone in the gallery from tribes that wishes to be to make any remarks? You're part of the application or just additional remarks? Okay. Mr. Kolcheski, would you like to come forward if you have something to add to the remarks that have been made so far? There you go.
There we go. Is that better? So, Antha Khatleno, Tim Kolcheski, biologist for Cowichan Tribes. I just wanted to add in really quick, Cowichan Tribes, this isn't a kind of a knee-jerk response to work with and support this project. There's a large-scale, long-term initiative looking at the health and well-being of the Cowichan Estuary. In my time and with my elders' direction and support, we've been working on revitalization of Cowichan Chinook, the South Coast Chinook. This is the single population in southern BC. Chinook are in dire straits. This is the single population of southern BC Chinook that have not only stopped the decline but have come back. And that's because of a long-term commitment. Prior to my time, Cowichan Bay has been closed, as was mentioned, for shellfish. Yes, that's a really big collective issue. That's one of our biggest issues. I'm really glad people are talking about and mentioning food security because that issue is huge. For Cowichan, there isn't the time to talk about and sort of explain how big some of these food security issues are. Our foods, whether it's shellfish, so as I've said, Cowichan Bay has been closed for more than 50 years. That means no shellfish. So the largest community in BC has, well, really two traditional food resources that we can get annually for our community. Two out of our entire territory. So food security issues are front and center. Health and well-being of the estuary, the river, are issues that we deal with daily. And whether it's climate change issue, sea level rise, Cowichan River temperatures, the fish kill that happened in the upper portion of the system, these are all issues we deal with every day. So the work that's suggested is a part of kind of a broader interest in the Cowichan Estuary and trying to not only reestablish camas beds and other traditional resources that aren't really accessible. 77% of Cowichan watershed is in private hands. So finding areas, particularly limited habitat areas, to bring back a lot of these resources and foods are crucial. So I just wanted to add that's a significant part of the interest in trying to find areas where we can bring back not just camas. I'm really glad and thankful to Quistanachan for bringing forward those words. That's really, really helpful. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Kolcheski. So just to provide some clarity as to where we go next with this discussion, I just want to again offer the opportunity for directors to pose any questions they may have to our applicants. And if there's no one interested in posing additional questions, we've had very informative and exhaustive staff reports. The next thing that I would be doing would be calling for a motion from the resolution or resolution from the package, or another. And so at this point, I'm just going to make another call. Is there any of the directors wish to pose any questions to the applicants? Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Put that back on there again. This is, and this is a question for the applicants. There has been mention that this is a very large area, and we're looking at food conservation from both points of view, from the Indigenous point of view and from the farmer's point of view. And I'm just wondering if any discussion has been made or any investigation has been made, if there's any room for any kind of compromise here, whether both could be supported on a 500 acre parcel of land. I know it's a difficult question to answer because it would take a lot of study, but has there been any moves to discuss any kind of compromise here, or is there one?
Before the applicant's answer, I'm just going to have to go to our parliamentarian in relation to the scope to the question that's before us, even though we don't have a motion on the floor yet. Okay, so trying to be very careful here. The question before us is whether or not our zoning and whether this is consistent with our zoning. So Director Wilson's question is straying somewhat in the nature of has there been negotiations between the applicants and the community around other arrangements? How does that pertain to the specific nature of the question that's before us? I'll rule your question in order, but fairly limited in its scope to, I guess it would be to Mr. Reid. Is that who you would pose it to?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I do apologise if I have strayed. It was never the intention. It was trying to get a little bit of clarity as to what's happened so far. But yeah, and thank you for accepting that. And as much as you can give me would be fine. And if that question can't be answered, then that's fine as well. Thank you.
Mr. Reid, can you answer that? Did you hear the question?
Yep, I heard the question,
fair enough.
and I appreciate the clarification from the scope of the matter at hand as well. So just for background, like we've assessed the property. I know we've been working with a local farmer for several years on this, and with the data we had collected over time, looking at the resilience and land use, and then engagement and working with Cowichan tribes, the decision was made to look at transitioning the land use to more of a use that would support food system revitalization, but also help support meeting those goals of fish and wildlife habitat and ecosystem resilience. So that's as far as can answer that question. In terms of that, it's just through the process of with all the different partners we have and with the nation, that land use decision was made moving forward, and hence the application in front of the committee today.
Director McClinton, I think you're the last one on my list.
Yeah, thank you. Through to the staff, I think. I'm just curious about the public engagement at the ALR, and if that's an appropriate question, I can withdraw. Is there, are the folks there offered opportunity? No, because we have to refer.
I don't even know that it's appropriate to put staff in that position. The ALR has their processes in which they do, and yeah. The information's written in the report. We work off of that. So looking around the table, I see no more questions. Oh, I do have a question. Director Nicholson, you want to pose a question? Oh, okay. So I'll turn to Director Nicholson. Go ahead.
I'd be happy to move the proposed recommendation.
All right, is there a seconder? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Robbins, would you read the recommended resolution, please?
That it be recommended to the board that application number ALR 23D01 at 2279 Cowichan Bay Road, PIDs, these are the identifiers of the parcel, 002-032-767 and 002-032-783, be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission with the following comments. 1, the proposed activities are consistent with permitted uses in the Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay Upland Zoning Bylaw number 3705, and 2, the proposed activities are consistent with policies in the official community plan for the electoral areas bylaw number 4270 that support local food production, ecological restoration, and climate change mitigation measures.
Thank you. So I don't think I've ever said this at Electoral Area Services Committee before, but electoral area directors only. Is everyone ready for the question? We'll call it now. All those in
I have
favor?
a question, Mr. Chair.
Oh, didn't see you there.
Sorry.
Director Acton, to the
Well,
motion.
I'm in full favor of this anyway, but I do have a question, I think, for staff. I guess I was a little surprised to see this on our agenda, that we have a decision to be made with this application when we had a tour and the funding was in place. I can't remember when we had a tour, but quite a while ago. I wasn't under the impression that it would come to this table at any point. So I guess I'm just confused as to why it is, because like if an agricultural land use of a watering hole, you know, like for animals is in place, it doesn't come here. Or for example, we have a big property here in Shawnigan Lake that apparently a fish farm is being created, so there was a water license that was necessary, and that's not going to come here. So I guess I'm just like some more clarity as to why, because I was surprised to see it.
Who's
Sorry,
Mr. Benna, go ahead.
Yeah. So my understanding is the ALC, has to interpret their regulations, and they have determined that a non-farm use application was required. So that is why it's before you today. Yeah, I get that. So anyway, it's just surprising because it to me is, but anyway, okay.
Okay, we have the resolution's been read. Is all the directors clear? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Let's take a short break. Is there a joke about heat in the kitchen or something? Okay.
You guys seem to be having a lot of fun over there.
Feels like all the tension's left the room. Louise Cododle, right? No. Chair. Tanya Soroka, that's her right there. All right, everyone, welcome back. Appreciate everyone's patience and attention during that last item, and we are now going backwards to R1, Mr. Robbins.
Which is a report from the Development Services Division with regards to application number SA21C08 at 3668 Telegraph Road. And before staff put something in front of you. We were expecting the applicant online, but I don't see the applicant online.
He's not attending. Yeah.
Are you presenting, Mr. Benna?
I am Chair Morrison.
Fire away, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So this application before you is a frontage exemption request for a 2-lot subdivision in Electoral Area C. The proposed lot 2 of the application has a road frontage of 7.09%, which is under the 10% frontage requirement in Section 512 of the Local Government Act. Next slide, please. This access is currently used by the existing dwellings on the subject property and appears to be sufficient to serve proposed lot 2, and staff are recommending exemption be granted. And I'll leave it at that.
All right. Questions from directors in regards to this application? I've got one. In regards to the layout here, oh, I got to go to the next one. I'm curious, wrong one. The subdivision plan shows what looks to me like about a fourth of the land area being subdivided to create the other lot. So not that it really matters, but has there been any expressed intent from the applicant to be looking at further subdivision and creation of new lots? Because I think under the zoning, they're just about allowed 4. And this appears to be that the limited frontage is sufficient for 1, and if you were to do that 2 more times, you'd end up with your 4 lots. Has there been any indication of that's the direction that they're going, or is this just once and they're keeping the big piece for themselves?
Thank you, Chair. So I can't speak for the applicant, but I can tell you that what is on the parcel now on proposed lot 2 is the principal dwelling, which the applicant resides in with their family, I believe. There's also an accessory dwelling that's separate, and they're separated enough that there could potentially be a future subdivision of that lot if they were interested in that. But there has been no discussion of beyond this current proposed subdivision.
Okay, fair enough. It just seems very clear what I would do if it were mine, and if we just need to consider the application that's before us. So I turn to committee as to what their thoughts are on the recommended resolution before us. Director Segal.
I'm wondering if is the applicant also here?
No.
No. Okay, so I do have a question, but I guess I'm not sure if Ms. Davina knows the answer. I noticed that the 2 lots have different water sources. One is the Braithwaite Improvement District and one is on-site well. Is that correct? I guess why are they not both the improvement district?
Great question. So for subdivision, for meeting the minimum parcel size for the 0.41, the proposed lot 1, they do need to be connected to a community water system. But how the bylaw reads, they can have a minimum lot size over 1 hectare if you have well. So they've sort of taken advantage of the fact that bylaw allows the minimum lot size to be 0.4 for connecting to community water system and then 1 hectare for on-site well. It's not typical.
So, seeing no other questions, Director Wilson, what would you like to do?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have driven the site and I've taken a look at it. There's plenty of room there. Well, I say plenty of room. There's enough room for what there. So I'm quite happy with the staff recommendation here.
You're going to move it?
Move that one.
Okay, seconded. Any discussion? Do we need it read? We should probably have it read.
That it be recommended to the board that proposed Lot 2 in subdivision application SA21C08, that's at 3668 Telegraph Road, PID 006658555, be exempted from the minimum parcel frontage requirement in accordance with Section 512 of the Local Government Act.
Thank you. Looking around, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? The motion carries. All items from today's agenda will go through to Valentine's Day, next Wednesday? Looks like it. That'll be fun.
We're going to move to R4 as R3 was removed. Staff would like a little more time with regards to that item. So R4 is a report from the Parks and Trails Division with regard to Electoral Area A, Mill Bay Malahat statutory right-of-way discharge between Fawn Terrace and Lodge Pole Road. There is a staff recommendation.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Vandendungen. I'm a Parks and Trails planner here, and I'll be speaking to R4 here. The report is to consider discharging the registered statutory right-of-way EG 110164 on several properties between Fawn Road and Lodge Pole Road in Electoral Area A, Mill Bay Malahat. This report did come to the committee previously, and a report was done back in 2022, September 7th. And in this report, it kind of outlined the reasons behind the applicant of the discharging of this. The board then made the resolution to put up an information sign to be posted on the Fawn Road public access right-of-way, advising the regional district to consider discharge of the right-of-way and seeking public feedback. And it also moved to send the application discharge to the electoral PAC as well, the Park Advisory. So the staff has since followed through with these two. And then September 8th, 2023 to October 20th, 2023, we put up a community notice at this statutory right-of-way, just informing folks of the consideration of discharging this statutory right-of-way. It was put in a very public spot next to their community mailboxes there, so it was pretty prevalent for anyone that would either collect in their mail or would be using the statutory right-of-way in order to give us feedback. And during this time, we ended up only receiving two responses from the community. One was not in favor of removing it because they said that they found it more convenient and safer than the alternative route that is currently there, which is to go around. The other one was a property owner, and they were in favor of it because it doesn't necessarily impact them other than the potential cost to do so. And that property owner, I should mention, is not the applicant property owner that made the original submission. And then afterwards, later in the fall, we sent it to the Parks Advisory Commission on November 14th. And we had a lengthy discussion about that with all the members there. But they did come to the recommendation to recommend to the board that the statutory right-of-way be discharged, subject to the financial amenity contribution to the electoral area Parks Community Reserve Fund equal to the fair market value of the SRW as determined by a certified land appraiser. And these minutes were forwarded to the committee on December 20th. So the Parks puts before you the two recommendations. The one is I should say, two options. The recommended one is that the SRW EG 110164 be discharged from the several properties between Fawn Road and Lodgepole Road. And it mentions and lists here the affected PIDs and the common property. But it's also subject to the financial amenity contribution from the property owners, the applicants, to the Electoral A Community Parks Capital Reserve Fund equal to the fair market value of the SRW as determined by the certified land appraiser. Option two is that the SRW not be discharged. I should summarize by saying like the Parks and Trails Division is supportive of the request to discharge this particular SRW because we don't actually have the ability to develop and maintain the public pathway per the limited conditions that this particular SRW has. There are also ongoing liability issues with consideration also with the best management approaches that we now have at the CVRD, that we don't have these kind of agreements moving forward. This is like a historical thing that we should have never agreed to in the beginning because we have like limited ability to actually oversee and manage the land. And then it is also not an established connection within our community parks or community pathway network outlined in our Parks and Trails master plan. So there are other routes that are within that plan that we're actively trying to establish that would help this connection that this community seeks as well. So those are the summary comments at the Parks and Trails Division, but the recommendation is before you, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Thank you. I have a number of questions, so I'll maybe ask a few and then Director Acton can go. So I know one of the property owners started this process. They want to remove the SRW, and another property owner saw the notice and said that they were okay with it, but they didn't necessarily have money to pay for it. What about the other? Because there's 5 properties here. So were the other property owners directly notified about this?
When the original application came through, I believe there was a couple of different landowners then. Since then, there's a few ones that have been like bought the land within this little subdivision here. So as I've heard from the original applicant, their intention is to reach out to them again, just to confirm their motivation to move forward with this if the board does move forward with the recommendation. And then once they get the confirmed consensus of moving forward, then we'll kind of move that process forward.
Right. And we don't have a number yet. We don't know how much it would cost. Yeah, I just feel like that's really important to have for these other property owners to be informed about what the next steps are. I'll give the floor to Director Acton.
Director Acton.
Hi there. I guess I'm kind of really concerned when I hear that people are using it for access to get to other areas. Like, do we know how many? And it feels really short-sighted to get rid of something like this just because it's a liability, or like we can make anything usable. And I don't know about Area A, but I know in Area B, we don't have this kind of detailed planning set out anyway. So to get a recommendation that the Parks and Master Trail Plan doesn't support it, doesn't really have a lot of weight because we haven't actually looked at what could all those little neighborhood connections do. And like, are kids using it to get to the bus stop? Are kids using it to get to school? Like there's are people using it to get to important areas like closer to the ocean, or on their way safe and off the highway? And so I think it's just really short-sighted to get rid of it. There's no amount of money that's going to make it worthwhile, and it's just such a thing that happens at the community level that I don't feel comfortable with this decision without going to see it. And or maybe like there's a counter there that says how many people are using it.
So
thank you.
We'll go to Mr. Farquhar, and I don't know, I got this niggling feeling that I might have been around when we accepted this, and that it's one of those trails to nowhere but I know that there's a deeper explanation as to why Parks has put forward the opinion that they have. Mr. Farquhar.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Van Dugen shared in his report. This came about many years before there was actually an active Parks and Trails Division, and probably a very active Parks Commission in Mill Bay as well. And I think the good intentions at the time unfortunately didn't really marry up with how we see parks and trails and pathway connections in particular within our more developed rural electoral areas developing. And we have a master plan for Mill Bay, similar to having master plans in several other electoral areas, which has a network mapped out of community connections that were supported by the community when the plan was developed. Just a little bit farther north of this particular SRW that exists, there is within the master plan plans for a trail to connect from the Mill Springs area and this neighborhood down into Mill Bay Center. And like we do in other electoral areas, we take opportunities when developments come along, whether it be subdivision or rezonings, to start finding ways to knit these things together. And this committee has been previously dealing with a separate subdivision application a bit farther north in Lodgepole Pine that has a piece of that future trail connection incorporated in it. So really we're dealing with something here that and I appreciate the comments by Director Acton. Even in Parks and Trails, we like to always look at opportunities, but unfortunately in this case, the circumstances to which this one was established many, many years ago, with I think good intentions at the time, doesn't marry up with the way we have the ability to manage and maintain effective trail network connections for communities in a safe and sustainable way. There's just too many challenges with the limitations with this SRW that doesn't give us the ability, as was shared, to actually make improvements, to look after maintenance, to manage it as an effective pathway for the community. So while we empathize with having opportunities for a community, this is not one of those that we think has worked well and certainly won't work well into the future. And with the property owner coming forward, making a formal application, we see this as a way to basically bring this little connection to a close and and work on a better one that the master plan supports for the community.
Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I guess my comments would be along the same line as Director Acton. I feel like I don't know this area well enough, but it looks like there's a number of lots that if you were walking down, and I am assuming that you cut through there and then down to the bottom of the hill where the fast food places are, A&W and so forth. So I imagine there are teenagers that would like to do that, cut off quite a bit of time if you're walking. And I mean, we've allowed these communities to develop, and they're not walkable or from that perspective. And I really think we need to, before we take away opportunities, we should understand how the whole area is going to develop. And I can't find a map on your community. It would have been helpful to have seen a map of the community trail master plan. I haven't been able to find it in the report. So I just think it's short-sighted, and yeah.
Back to you, Director Segal.
I really appreciate the comments of Director Acton and Director Nicholson. At first blush of the report, it looks like there's a property owner that doesn't want it. It makes sense from Parks' perspective to get rid of it, but I just have this feeling in my gut about it that's hard to articulate because there are community members, there are kids. There's a mailbox on the other side. There's a bus stop, and we don't have an existing alternative right now. I feel like it would be different if we did have a different alternative. So I have a liability question that always comes up. So if the CVRD is not allowed to make any changes or do anything on it, then how does that reflect back a liability? If we were allowed to put in a path, then I think we'd have liability because we'd have path there that we'd have to maintain. But so can you explain that to me?
Mr. Chair, not being a lawyer, but the elements are around the fact that the SRW is the name of the CVRD. So anything happening there brings the CVRD into it because the SRW, under the name of the CVRD, is allowing for public use within the statutory right-of-way. But it does not give us the ability to make any improvements or otherwise manage it like we would a normal trail for the community. But because we have the statutory right-of-way, if somebody were to injure themselves on it, guess what? CVRD would be named, just for the virtue that we have an SRW there. So that, as I said, unfortunately, the terms and conditions of the SRW, when struck, I think with the best of intentions at the time, were not well scripted out in terms of what it was providing the regional district and the community in terms of a public access. If it had been more detailed in terms of allowing for us to go in there and build and maintain and take all the responsibilities for upgrading and ensuring public safety on using a corridor through somebody's property, which today we do have elsewhere, typically not through a residential backyard, more typically on forest lands and the like. These give us much more powers and ability to manage it under our parks program. This is just a right of access under a stat right of way, with the CVRD being named as the holder of the stat right of way.
Right, and I guess I need a bigger conversation about SRWs, but follow up?
Mr. Van den Dungen.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add some additional information that it was never established as a trail. So what has come to be is this SRW is effectively going down one property owner's driveway through the common property backyard and then through someone else's driveway. So as I would agree that it would be great if this was a trail and established as a trail, we just can't actually make it one because of the limitations behind it. So part of like the liability as mentioned is because you're essentially embedding along people's property, and that division between the two is not really like readily made there because like there isn't like a fence and a fence delineating that to happen. And part of the restrictions of this SRW is we can't actually build a fence to even establish that.
Yeah, I've been to the site and I know there's a driveway and a retaining wall kind of like right smack in the middle of the SRW, and so, you know, that happened at some point before our time. This is a sticky one. So I guess my final question is, what happens if we find out what the, financial contribution is supposed to be, and some people don't pay, like other homeowners aren't able to pay it? Like, it seems like that's required before this is discharged.
Yes, as I believe the process will be, is that the applicants will go and hire an appraiser to come up with that number. And then it would be the applicants and the property owners to come up with who's going to pay how much of that, because obviously some have more interest than others in that. So that'll be upon them whether they can come to an agreement about how they would come to that sum of money. And then that's where we take that discussion further from there.
So it's the applicant that figures out the amount, not the CVRD.
Well, the amount is developed from the appraisal. So the
Right,
appraisal.
like they're responsible for, getting that
Yeah,
appraisal.
so the sum
not
of
the
money,
CVRD.
it will always be what the appraisal is, but then it's up to the applicants of the share of that. So the main applicant might pay more than like some of the other like common property owners, for instance, but it's up to them how they come up with that appraised sum.
So, I mean,
Got speakers.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I can understand the both directors' concerns about this, and it concerns me as well because we hear the liability word all the time, and it's always liability. Well, we own the land and we can't do this, and if somebody falls over and hurts himself, and it seems to me that every time this comes up, we lose track of common sense here. It's a court, and I'm not a lawyer, as Brian says, he's not either, but if somebody falls over in there, are they really going to come after somebody on this one? So I don't follow the liability part of this at all. But I would say that it's worth hanging on to this purely as a rabbit run for those people who are using it. Unless trouble's being caused down there for whatever reason, I'd say leave it as it is. I don't see a problem here. We need these little rabbit runs.
Okay, we don't have a resolution on the floor. We've got Director McClinton and Acton.
SR 71, I feel like it's going to get nicknamed the Blackbird. I'm just curious are we able to change question through to staff. Are we able to change the rules? Like, is that within our purview? If the bylaw? Or is that a level above us?
Mr. Farquhar.
Mr. Chair, through the Director McClinton, it would only be by mutual agreement of both parties. So we cannot go in there and unilaterally change the conditions of a stat right-of-way, nor can somebody else unilaterally change a stat right-of-way that CVRD holds without our approval through the board.
Follow-up thing.
Go ahead.
And if there was a mutual agreement, is there room and space and the full distance to put fencing in afterwards?
Mr. Chair, based on my walkthroughs, as was indicated about the existing driveways, no, there would not be. These are smaller residential lots within a developed residential neighborhood. As we typically do within new developments, we work with the developers to have separated pathways, separated between two adjoining residential properties, so the residential property owners can enjoy their own backyards, front yards, side yards, and we work with neighbors. If they want to have privacy fencing, they can put privacy fencing in, but in this case, it's actually literally going through side yards of people's properties.
Final follow-up.
I'm just thinking about that path in Saltaire, the connector that goes through, and it's shoulder width with two fences that takes me right to I run it every day, it takes me to the Stocking Creek.
Mr. Chair, that's a wonderful example of where we were able to work with a developer who was doing a subdivision to have a separated, dedicated pathway to the CVRD and the community to establish and maintain a pathway. That is our objective, and that has been our mantra for a number of years in terms of looking at developing community network pathway systems within our communities. This predates any such opportunities to negotiate, so.
Yeah, that's not what we have here. Director Acton.
Yeah, so thank you to Parks for all the information. It's clearer now why this is a good idea. And but the only thing, just on a kind of critical note, is the applicant hiring the appraiser, because there's a little bit of room, or quite a bit of room for some subjectivity in there, and it can clearly not be in our favor. It's too bad we don't have a list of approved appraisers or some way of ensuring that we are getting a good deal for the community back. But I'll be supporting the staff recommendation. That makes sense.
Turn to the director for the area.
So I only feel comfortable supporting this if we had a existing alternative. And so I know it's in the plan, but I also know how long it takes for trails to manifest. So I'd rather leave it as is until we have a viable alternative. So what are my options for that? Is that a referral back to staff when there's an existing alternative, or should I move option 2?
Well, maybe we should go to staff
Or
and
use
ask if there's a
suggestions.
reasonably defensible timeline for the alternative connection that she spoke of.
Mr. Chair, I would have to share with the committee at this point in time, anything is reasonable in terms of time, but will something be in place tomorrow? No. It's really what's happening on the ground that's external to what the CVRD is doing in terms of other subdivisions in play. And as you know, we're not the approving authority, so as these other subdivisions proceed through their processes, that's when the opportunities and the pieces come together.
So just in general, and perhaps other staff might jump in, but you know, it sounds to me like you have a willing applicant who's prepared to go forth and do some of the work. Now, it may be, but not right now, but those circumstances could change. So I think in your initial inquiry about, you know, how is the money determined and, you know, ultimately who's going to pay what, not really our concern as long as a check shows up and we're prepared to go through the legal path of discharging it. I think there is downside risk, and it's not liability this time, of delaying this or revisiting in 6 months or revisiting a year. You may not have the same property owners in place or the same willingness to pursue this. So it's one of those, if you're so inclined, maybe refer it to the next meeting and chew on it for a couple of weeks, and we can make a decision in 2 weeks' time.
All right, I'll refer it to the next meeting. Oh, okay.
Before the referral to the next meeting happens, we'll go to Director Martman.
I think there's been, the one thing I always like is the information on use. And do you have any idea on the number of people using this trail? Because use also implies risk. So do we have that, or is it just we had 2 respondents?
To respond to the comment, we don't have data on this because this is one of our major parks that we actually have a trail counter in to have those numbers with. So we do only have like the 2 applicants that realize that they would even want or are interested in this SRW and this connection. We were actually surprised not to hear more from the community about this, or even the desire to. But yeah, we don't have numbers of, the many people that may or may not be using it, or the people that even potentially may or may not want to use it.
And we have the capability to find out?
It would take a long time to process to get those valuable numbers, because you would have to put a trail counter there and to see how many people come about that, but it would not be a reliable number because it's also people's driveways and they have pets, other people living there, so it could just be counting the folks going in and out of their houses. So I don't think we can actually get a reliable data in which to tell us how many people are using it.
Mr. Farquhar.
Yeah, those are good points. And further to that, I mean, staff are also looking at this from both sides. We're also looking at from the community in terms of this is a connector, albeit a very limited one in terms of what it provides. We're also looking at from the perspective of the community in terms of residents and the property owners that have this SRW on their property that allow for the public to go across it with no improvements, with no ability for CVRD to manage that use. So whether it's a little bit of use or medium amount of use, it's an impact. I mean, it's a sort of impact that as staff we would never bring forward to the committee and board such recommendations within a development to be putting public access of sorts through somebody's side and backyards in a residential neighborhood. It's just not something that we would feel comfortable supporting as a condition for a subdivision, because it's contrary to understanding within our community people's expectations of rights of privacy, expectations of having a place of home and a place where they can feel secure with their families. This SRW, through several properties, negates that for these particular residents in terms of their homes and their properties. And I appreciate and totally understand and support, we want to make our communities complete and livable, but is this livable for the people that have this SRW on their properties versus finding ways and continue to work within the community and our master plans and developing a network of trails and pathways that move people around, but establishing them in a fashion that is public space and is separate from people's own private property. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Farquhar. And just an observation on that, Director Segal's area is fairly densely populated down there. And we've put notices up at the post office box, I gather. And just an observation would be that if we've had 2 responses over a fairly lengthy period of time, it would generally indicate not a huge amount of traffic through there, but I think at this point, given not a clear direction, that a motion to refer this to the next meeting for a decision would be more than appropriate. So would you be moving that?
So moved.
And seconded. Any further discussion? Call the question. Yep. Director Segal.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment that these property owners would have definitely known that there was an SRW on their property when they purchased it. I completely understand that we wouldn't start from there, but when they bought, they knew it was there. Yeah.
All right, referral to next meeting. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Mr. Robbins.
We're going to move to R5, the report from the Inspection and Enforcement Division with regards to bylaw dispute adjudication system. There's a two-part recommendation from staff. Mr. Harris is here to walk you through his report and the recommendation.
Welcome, Mr. Harris. What do you got for us today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of my report today is to introduce the bylaw dispute adjudication system as an alternative to the municipal ticket for ticketing of minor bylaw contraventions. And I do have a slide PowerPoint. Okay. So, slide number 2, please. The adjudication system was established by the provincial government in 2003 to provide an alternative approach for processing and resolving minor bylaw infractions. The legislation is designed to enable a simple, more cost-effective administration system for minor contraventions for both the local government and the public. The system provides a simpler front-end ticket process for initiating enforcement and a locally managed back-end venue for a non-judicial adjudicator to hear ticket disputes in a local forum and not in a provincial court. Next slide, please. Within the legislation, a local government must make a request to the Ministry of Attorney General by board resolution to be added by regulation to a list of bodies to which the Act applies. The Act is the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act. And to provide authority to establish an adjudication system under the Act. Next slide, please. The bylaw dispute adjudication system eliminates the requirement for personal service. This has been a challenge, just issuing tickets is the service of the tickets. This system you can mail the ticket. It is presumed to be established within 7 days after mailing, or to be received, sorry. The ticket or the notice can be left on a motor vehicle as well. It's presumed to be received that day. The system provides a timely dispute resolution-based approach to obtain independently adjudicated decisions, no attendance of witnesses, and no need for legal counsel. The adjudication hearings can be held in person, writing, video, audio conference, or by telephone. A definite convenience. It is a dedicated bylaw forum and provides more accessible venue for determining simple infractions. It reduces the demands and the reliance on the provincial court system. It better balances between the amount imposed, which is a maximum of $500 as set by the legislation, and the cost of pursuing the contravention in court. Next slide. The process begins with the delivery of the bond, which is the bylaw offense notice, or when it is presumed to be received. The person has 14 days to take action, to pay or dispute. If the payment is received within 14 days of being received, there will be a discounted early payment penalty. If the payment is received between 15 and 28 days, it's a standard penalty. Greater than 29 days, a late penalty applies. If the notice is disputed, the notice will be reviewed by a screening officer and the disputant. The screening officer is in place to reduce the number of disputed notices forwarded to adjudication, and in addition, the screening process may be educational as the screening officers explain the bylaw in question, allowing citizens to better understand the bylaws, and in some cases, realize the errors that they committed. This may result in the withdrawal of the notice to dispute following the discussion. The screening officer will either then confirm or cancel the bylaw offense notice and may possibly enter into a compliance agreement depending on if agreement is an option for the specific offense. A compliance agreement will include acknowledgement of the contravention and set remedies and conditions on future behavior to be performed within a designated period of time and reduce the fine at the conclusion of that period. The maximum period that the compliance agreement can go is 1 year. If the If the compliance agreement is unfulfilled, the fine is due. Next slide, please. As mentioned, a request is made to the Ministry of Attorney General by board resolution to be added by regulation to a list of bodies to which the Act applies and provide authority to establish an adjudication system under the Act. We must determine key features such as matters to be enforced by the bylaw offense notice, fine amounts, and associated schedules. We must confirm the regulation has been amended to apply to the CBRD. I've spoken to the Ministry of Attorney General, Justice Services branch, and they've estimated a cabinet sitting in early April for potential approval. Next slide, please. Following that, we must prepare the bylaw to adopt the adjudication system. So there's actual bylaw to be adopted. It's bylaw offense notice enforcement bylaw. It will set out the definitions, relevant offenses, fine amounts, registry information, screening officer powers, obligations, duties, and functions, and other agreements. We must prepare associated policies and notices. And we must prepare a communication plan for the public, social media, website, paper, etc., so the public is well informed of the new system and what the procedures are. So we are estimating that it may be operational contingent on board approval by the third or fourth quarter of 2024. Questions?
Director Martin.
Great, it sounds wonderful. Where's the catch?
Well, that's the unknown factor. We don't know what's going to happen here. None of us have had experience issuing it, but we've talked to other local governments. It seems to be a very simple, efficient way to issue tickets with a simple way to prosecute or dispute. So it seems beneficial both to the local government and to the people of the CVRD. We don't know where the catch is.
Follow up?
Yeah, the catch is always fun to try to find out beforehand. The other question I would have is, somewhere in this process of next steps, do you see setting up sort of a dashboard in terms of reporting out about I guess, different things are different at different steps, like how many items are at the screening officer, how many or did deal with the screening officer, the outcome of those versus how many went to the next process?
Through the chair to Director Martman, absolutely. That is something we'll be able to catch in a quarterly stats report that we typically present. It would be no different than including our municipal ticket information in the report as we do today. Yeah.
Director Wilson, followed by Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rob. Pretty much of a no-brainer here, and I do love flow charts. I think they're brilliant because it goes back to the old days of if-then statements and conditional branching and this, that, and so. So, the question is, at the moment, I'm looking in the report and I don't see it anywhere unless I've missed it. What's the process for it at the moment if you get a ticket? You have to go to provincial court? I think you mentioned that.
Through the chair to Director Wilson, yeah, exactly. If you get a ticket today, it's a municipal ticket. You have 14 days to dispute or pay, much like the offense notice. If it is disputed, we proceed to court. So now we go to court. We need to file papers. We need to set up a hearing. We need to serve the offender with papers. It's quite an involved process. And then you're at the mercy of the court. Will it be canceled that day due to overbookings, which we've seen in the past? It just removes that reliance on the court. That's why the system has been introduced to have an adjudication system as opposed to being here by a judge. It's an independent adjudicator supplied by the Ministry of Attorney General, just to be a more convenient, simple, upfront, cheaper process.
And very quick follow-up, please, Mr. Chair. And that's great because it sounds very cumbersome right now. So to me, I have no problem with this thing. So anyway, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And before I go to Director Acton, in regards to Director Martman's inquiries, if we knew what the surprises were in advance, it would be surprises. Go to Director Acton next.
Thank you. Yeah, all of those sound great, and it sounds like it'll give you more tools and quicker ways to solve disputes. I'm wondering, can we anticipate a bit of a change in how we can collect those fines then? Like, for example, will we start to get more rights or abilities like municipalities have to charge properties on property taxes? For example, for like unsightly premise, you know, if somebody's told you need to clear it up, and if they don't, we do it, and then they get billed. Or do we anticipate anything like that coming?
So, through the chair to Director Acton, the process is similar to collecting on a municipal ticket. If somebody does not pay, we will send a payment demand letter reminding them that it is due, and we may pursue it in court. That usually instigates payment. If it doesn't, we'll follow the course. We can attend the court, provincial courthouse, and we will file a certificate, and we will schedule a payment hearing. It's a very simple process to do that. It takes a matter of minutes. We walk over to the courthouse, we file the appropriate paperwork, and then we will serve the person with the summons to attend a payment hearing. And this is something we regularly do, and we have something in stream at this time. And the person will be summoned to court to bring all their financial information and to sit down in front of a justice of the peace to figure out what they can financially afford to pay us back, to pay that debt. So it's a fairly simple collection process. For us, it's not a fun process for the debtor, but it's an effective way to collect the fine and send that message. So we anticipate that we will do something similar at that point, because there are limitations as a regional district as opposed to a municipality that we still face.
Director McClinton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a few questions. My first instinct on this was like, oh, imagine getting a ticket in the mail. I was having flashbacks to like when we implemented the photo radar, and we went nuts. But I'm also seeing there's lots of municipalities and local governments. It'd be really interesting to get any more information from them on their experience. The people I hear from, I think they're the loudest outspoken minority, but I don't know for sure. But I do hear from a significant group of people. They feel like there's an overreach until it's time for your garbage to be collected. Then they're wondering where you are. But I think I'm just a little bit more cautious about it. So those are my comments, I guess. Last thing, is there any indication that this raises revenue for those local governments? Any sort of numbers around that after it was implemented? And the other question would be, is there an opt-out if for some reason there is surprises and it's not working for us?
Mr. Harris.
Through the chair to Director Clinton, McClinton, sorry. Yeah, there would be an opt-out at some point where we just do not renew the registry agreement. I have talked to some of our member municipalities, such as North Cowichan and the City of Duncan and the Regional District of Nanaimo. I don't think I'd call it a moneymaker, and we are anticipating that it'll be cost neutral for the CBRD. And with the potential to actually generate a little more ticket revenue, but not something that's going to, we anticipate will be a huge sum of money. So yeah, once we're in it, we don't have to stay in it, and we do see some advantages, particularly, for the mailing, where we are facing trying to serve out-of-town owners, which is a big big challenge, particularly if we're going to move forward with any sort of short-term rental enhanced enforcement, where you have a lot of out-of-town owners. So, you know, it will have its place and it will have some advantages to enforcement. We really think our Parks Department, our ranger will find it quite useful, as well as our animal control, and the bylaw services for the CVRD for more minor offenses.
Just a follow-up comment, if I may. Yeah, just thinking about it, like, you know, the few people that have had infractions in my areas actually speak pretty highly of you guys and say that you were just very reasonable to deal with, and so I'd be really nervous about losing that face to face. But I guess if this is sort of a supplemental piece or an additional tool, is that the idea? Yeah.
It through the chair to Director McClinton, it certainly is. It's just another tool in the tool belt, and you know, for most of the minor offenses that this would capture, we're looking for voluntary compliance. And we give citizens the opportunity to achieve that. Unfortunately, not everybody takes that path, and this will give us another tool in the belt to you know, send the message. And when we do issue tickets, it's not lightheartedly. You know, usually people are given lots of opportunity, and it's well thought through. There are some circumstances where it may be serious enough that there is no warning or compliance agreements or anything like that, and it is a ticket, but it should, it's another tool in the tool belt. No.
Yeah, thank you. And just to give a little context, I think we started this, not this board, but the previous board at the beginning of the last term. We're talking about this around corporate strategic planning. Had a major day-long workshop. The idea of this was introduced. I think it kind of ebbs and flows as far as the public perception around how we're doing on bylaw enforcement. And I think that the thing that appealed to me about this is it's very neutral, and it is a fairly accepted and, as I say, neutral way of doing business, and it's an added tool, and it's taken a long time to get us there, and it'd be nice to see this implemented and see how it works. So with that, I think we have a resolution here. Would anybody be willing to move it? Moved. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Do you want to read it out, please, Mr. Robbins?
That it be recommended to the board that staff prepare bylaws, policies, and agreements for the implementation of the bylaw dispute adjudication system provided for in the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act for the board's approval. And two, that the staff work with the Justice Services Branch, Ministry of Attorney General, to request the Lieutenant Governor and Council of the Province of British Columbia enact a regulation under Section 29 of the Local Government Bylaw Notice of Enforcement Act to apply the act to the Cowichan Valley Regional District.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. The motion carries. Let's take 5 minutes and then we'll knock the last two off. Director Acton, we're about to get going again. Welcome back, everyone. I believe we are on R6, Mr. Robbins, what do you got for us?
We are, but I just wanted to say, if then therefore, you gotta love a flow chart, right? Director Wilson? Thanks, Mr. Harris.
Amazing flowcharts.
And I just wanted to also take the time to give a shout out to Jennifer Hughes, our recording secretary. And she never gets the accolades, but keeping us well organized. So I just wanted to thank Jennifer for that. And I just can't get over flow charts. I just can't get over flow charts. I used to do that back in the 90s, and I just love them, and now it's just great. Now I'm fixated on flow charts. R6, report from the Inspection Enforcement Division with regard to the 2023 year-end bylaw enforcement report. Mr. Harris again.
Mr. Harris.
Is there any flow charts in this one?
There is no flow chart, but there is a pie chart and a graph. Yeah.
A colorful pie chart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm here for questions. The report is for information.
Alrighty, any questions in regard to all the little X's on the complaint map, plat map, or nature of them? Oh, look at that. We'll go this way. Director Martman.
Well, your head down.
Yes.
So I was just thinking, thank you for the report, by the way. And I still see Area H is represented, not well, but I'm having a feeling that have you ever overlaid cell phone reception on top of this and see if there's a correlation? Because we have lousy cell phone reception in my area. Thoughts?
Through the chair to Director Martman. No, we haven't, but we could probably do that if it interests you, and you can correlate complaints to cell phone service. Not a problem.
It was just an observation. I think I'll leave it to the board to decide if they want to spend money on that.
Director Nicholson.
I'm really interested in looking at it year over year so that we can see if there are trends in particular issues that we should be paying attention to. So I am wondering if it's possible on your reports to do that. So if we could understand whether, for example, the short-term rental issue is becoming more or less. If we looked at it year over year, it might be helpful. It didn't seem to me to be that huge an issue, and also by area would be helpful on that particular one. And also riparian fractions I'm interested in, and people living in RVs. So I know some of this stuff is sort of lumped under zoning, but that doesn't give you enough information to really understand. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that possibility.
Sure, through the chair to Director Nicholson. Absolutely, and that's a really good suggestion to actually capture some of the previous year's statistics, so you do have some sort of comparison, not only to the numbers, but to the type of offenses that are predominant at that time. So moving forward, that's a great suggestion, and we will make it happen probably in a chart type thing where you can look, over the previous year, and maybe we'll even throw in 2 years back, to illustrate any kind of trends or turns or what the flavor is. And we could certainly distinguish or separate dwelling in RVs. It is captured under zoning. We have separated short-term rentals, very specific to zoning issues. But we can also do that if that's what the committee would like, is to separate living in RV complaint or anything else that we can specify and narrow for you guys. Yeah.
Director Deck.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. I'm just wondering if you could give me an example of what a utility infraction might look like.
Absolutely, through the chair to Director Deck. So in this specific case, what we'll typically run into is complaints regarding water restrictions when it's a CBRD water system. So that is a little more forefront these days with the water availability, et cetera. So what you will see in this particular report were related to water restriction violations, and there was one call for assistance for water utilities where an adjacent neighbor to a facility was impeding access to the facility. So we assisted engineering with that problem and have the neighbor provide full access to the facility for our utilities workers.
Thank you. I have one more question.
Sure.
I'm just, Area I has quite a few short-term rentals, and I see very few complaints, maybe even none. One. So I'm just wondering if neighbors who might be worried about the short-term rental problem, let's say right next door to them, if you get a sense that they're kind of not shy of reporting because of, their neighbors might get mad at them?
Through the chair to Director Deck, absolutely. We can't really explain the human psyche. Some people have no problem approaching their neighbors and speaking with them regarding it, and some make it very clear that they have reservations regarding approaching their neighbors, whether it's not wanting to ruin a good relationship or fear of reprisals. So it seems artificially low, one complaint, but that's what we have received for Area I. I think there was a total of 5 for the year in the entire CBRD, and I don't think there was any more than 1 in an electoral area. But we're quite surprised, really, at that, and we'll see what the future unfolds here as we progress with the new mandates from the provincial government and whatnot.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Director Wilson. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think somebody's already pointed out that Area B seems to be the really bad people around here. So I won't comment on that, even though I have already. Interestingly enough, these animal control summaries, Rob, that is purely what Coastal Animal Services have given you, because there's a figure in there for the number of dog licenses sold, which is only 98. Is that only what they've reported?
Through the chair to Director Wilson, 98 is typically during the course of their duties related to complaints. So what that more than likely reflects, and I will inquire for certainty, but I believe it is, through their course of their duties and investigating animal control complaints, if they come across an unlicensed dog, then part of compliance is to license the dog. So through their course of the duties servicing the CBRD, responding to these complaints, 98 licenses have been sold.
Okay.
Yeah, the number off the top of my head is approximately 7,500 licenses.
That makes more sense.
Within the CBRD.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I looked at this figure and I thought, well, that can't be right. Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
it's specific to the complaints they're dealing with when they come across a dog that's not licensed.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you. That was one of the questions that I had, and I've got myself on the list, and it's in regards to, some of the data here, and especially around the short-term rentals. I found that there's sort of 2 issues at play that maybe Director Deck had alluded to, is that if there's a certain area in the community that there seems to be a fair number of short-term rentals carrying on, they don't tend to report on one another. So it can be just very quiet, even though it's understood that there's a high degree of short-term rentals that are carrying on in an area. We don't have any official complaints to the CVRD about it. And so that's a bit of an odd one. And I think the other one, what I discovered in my community, and it's because our staff are so good at explaining how they go about some of their duties. I know that after a complaint to staff in regards to a short-term rental, it was explained that there would be likely some further follow-up and investigation as to the Airbnb platform and the likes. And so community members, once they found out a complaint had been made, they figured it was all done and taken care of, and so there weren't any subsequent complaints about, any number of a half a dozen properties that were in a constant state of causing upset in the community. And what I heard loud and clear was that, well, so-and-so phoned back in April, so why would I need the phone again? Well, there's the need for volume to get the resources to follow up on that sort of thing. So have you noted that, Mr. Harris?
Directly to Director or Chair Morrison. Yeah, that's true. And what I would encourage the directors to do and to convey to your constituents is to take a look at the bylaw enforcement page. It is mentioned in this year-end report. We've had significant improvements to it in respect to the information that is provided in there, and such as what happens when you make a complaint. There's a frequently asked questions section to that does actually explain that once we have reached compliance and we back off, it may become an issue again, and we may not be aware of it. And we need to be made aware of that because we are not obviously monitoring these once we close a file. So there's a real wealth of new information on that services page. It has a link to our bylaw enforcement policy, making a complaint, generally frequently asked questions for bylaw enforcement. One of them being a recommendation that Director Nicholson made about living in tiny homes and RVs. There's some information on that. So we've also added an online complaint form to make it easier for people to file a complaint as to phoning it in or emailing. So familiarize yourself with the page, and you can refer your community to that page, and there's a lot of good information in there. And we've even got a link to the People's Law School, which is an arm of the University of BC. It's kind of a little more geared for municipalities, but even has suggestions for talking to your neighbors and how to approach your neighbors on difficult discussions, whether it be fences or noise and things like that. So it's a nice resource to look at, and people can have a better understanding of the whole process and what we need to do our jobs.
I think I saw another hand up there. Was it over here, Director Nicholson? Yes.
Thank you. Can you refresh my memory on how we're handling, I know that it's complaint driven, so how are we handling people living in tiny homes and RVs? What is the process for that now?
Okay, so through the chair to Director Nicholson. Firstly, we are mainly complaint-driven, but within our policy, we can initiate an investigation at any time. And specific to RVs and tiny homes, that's something to be truthful, we're not overly proactive on it whatsoever. We will be complaint driven. We look at a number of factors as to what is the impact to the neighborhood, what is the impact to the environment. Will provide us a dictated timeline for compliance. But we're not actively seeking them out. It's something, somebody has a concern, and we investigate. And I can tell you there's two extremes to that. These people are usually in a difficult situation, obviously. And some are out of sight, out of mind. They do everything they need to protect the environment and handle their waste appropriately. No police presence, no disturbances, that type of thing. And then we'll see the extreme. theft in the neighborhood, police constantly called, noise complaints, fires, discharging of black and gray water into ditches. We've seen it all, and that certainly will take a priority with us, and they will have an extremely short period of time to cease that use. But I think we're all familiar with the housing situation and what is going on out there, and it's not something we're actively seeking out.
Right, so I really appreciate that, and I get it as long as it's not causing environmental damage or safety issues. So how do you come up with the length of time you give them?
So through the chair, back to Director Nicholson, it's usually, we try to be consistent with the length of time. It's a bit of a case-by-case basis. Everybody has different circumstances and financial circumstances. So we try to be as compassionate as we can and fair yet firm. It's a difficult position to be in, and I've said it before. Really, you're pushing the problem around to a certain degree.
That's my issue.
Yeah. So, maybe with some of these affordable housing initiatives, maybe this will ease some of or loosen up some of this rental stock for these people. But, the cost of living in southern Vancouver Island, and the housing availability for people on fixed incomes or whatnot, it's a bit of a dire situation. And I think we all probably have seen RVs somewhere where somebody's resided in them. That is, we're given direction to enforce the bylaws, and that's what we do until we're directed otherwise. But we try to be very reasonable in a timeline, yet we can't let it go on forever, unfortunately.
Director Martin?
So maybe I can just follow that up a little further with a question around what would be the consequence of, if you looked at it from both a safety and an environmental perspective and said there's no issue here in the immediate term, that you could say, 6 months from now, we'll just double check on that again. And, somehow set some parameters where you're not playing the whack-a-mole, or the idea that a person that is really complaint-driven is going to push people to areas where they're just not seen. It doesn't, I think you get what I'm saying. And is there, and maybe I'm asking for the wrong thing, but somehow I'm looking for an opportunity so that legitimate complaints are dealt with, but ones that, are just going to move, somebody that's not doing any safety or environmental issues.
Before you answer, I was about to suggest that we maybe not take that next step, because I think what Mr. Harris has described as that flexibility, that case by case, their best judgment is, I think, important for them to maintain that without there being a set of parameters that are discussed and applied, as we no doubt have enforcement files that are ongoing right now. So I wouldn't want to put Mr. Harris in a position where he would be saying that as a general rule, and yet we may have an enforcement file that is going on behind the scenes. So I appreciate where you're going, and I think there's maybe more thought required before we have a discussion in open about specific parameters that we would either hear from staff or give to staff to implement. It's kind of an awkward discussion to have, but just on that point, I think there may be exposure here in discussing this much further. I look over and got a nod from Mr. McDonald. Is that clearly enough explained? Mr. Harris?
So I would just add that, this is not talking about 2023, but in 2024, bylaw enforcement would like to bring forward an opportunity for the committee to provide some direction on a new bylaw enforcement policy.
Okay.
And what the priorities of the communities are. So that's something you can expect moving forward, where you can set your enforcement priorities, or what are your high-level priorities, what are your lower level, what do you want us to be proactive on, what you don't. And I'll leave it at that.
Do we have an anticipated timeline for this report coming forward?
I can make it happen sooner than later, absolutely. So, I could probably do it in the next 3 months, 3 to 6 months, and get something forward if that's sufficient, and we can look at that. And it was a recommendation through the service review in 2022. Last policy was created in 2017. Not all of the directors were sitting at the table at this time that are sitting here now. So that's something that we will do.
I think there's a keen interest amongst the committee, so that would be something that we'd like to see probably sooner than later, so great. Does that conclude your line of questions? Fantastic. Any other questions in regards to this report? We've got one more item left. Plus question period, of course. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Robbins, next item. Carrie's been waiting all day. Welcome, Mr. Tippett.
Sorry, I was just catching up my my screen here. R7, report from Community Planning Division with regards to implementing the requirements of the housing statutes. That's the Residential Development Act Bill 44. There's a three-part recommendation as well that follows.
Okay, hello, Mr. Chair and committee. Ian, can you get full screen possibly? Or? Sorry. Yeah, okay, well, we'll proceed as is for now, at least. Yeah, perfect. Well, except it's not the first slide. Just go up one more, I think. Okay, that's the title, okay. There we go. Thank you very much. So as Patrick pointed out, this is a report concerning Bill 44, which is officially called the Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act. That is an act of the provincial legislature that requires local governments of various types to ensure that formerly single-purpose, single detached dwelling or single-family dwelling, as they're called now in our bylaw, development areas are open to having suites in all cases. For clarity, it is not Bill 35, which is the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act. That is a matter which we will be reporting to committee on soon, on the matter of opting into the principal residency requirement in respect of short-term rentals. And we are also going to be preparing an APC report for all of the APCs on Bill 35 later. So hopefully that clarifies the relationship between the two. They're kind of related, but they're not really. Bill 35 is not part of this report. So next slide, please. So essentially, we're calling the various bylaws that are attached to this report Bill 44 compliance bylaws. We're essentially required to ensure that attached, which are currently called secondary suites in most of our bylaws, are permitted in all zones where a single detached dwelling, which is a new term that we're proposing through these amendment bylaws, is the main use. So you will know that in most cases for single detached dwellings or single family dwellings, we pretty much permit suites almost everywhere. Even in Saltaire, however, in Saltaire at the moment, they're only permitted to be the attached kind. But having said that, Bill 44 goes on to say on the second bullet point, we're not permitted in a zoning bylaw to specify a minimum site area that one must have. I'm talking here about the property size in order to get the right to have a suite. So basically Bill 44 directs the local governments to say you're permitted to have a suite if you have a single family residential use zone, period, and no minimum site area. Goes on further to say in the third bullet point that you cannot require in a bylaw, in a zoning bylaw, owners to occupy the principal residence or even specify the type of entrance to the suite. So again, looking back at the various zoning bylaws that we have in place right now, we typically do have, well, in some cases, we have an owner residency requirement for the suite to be permitted. And also, we do, in some cases, regulate the type of entrance, like can it be around the side of a building or the front or whatever, things like that. We're not allowed to do that anymore under Bill 44. Bill 44 goes another step further, which is it says that any amendments required to zoning bylaws to comply with Bill 44 shall not go to public hearing. We are interdicted from from having a hearing in respect of any Bill 44 compliance bylaws. There's also a companion policy manual that came out from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs in respect of Bill 44, which sets out a number of non-mandatory measures to be considered that could complement the measures in the above bullets on this slide to encourage suites through time. They're not mandatory at this time, but we will be taking them into consideration when we're developing the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. The bottom line in terms of timing is the amendments to the zoning bylaws to comply with the points noted above in Bill 44 is June 30th of this year. And finally, you will remember, I hope, that there was a grant given to us in relation to this Bill 44 compliance work and other related work. So that's the one nice thing about it. The timeline is very compressed, but there were some resources along with it. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do now is, because we have various zoning bylaws, and the director for Area D is lucky because he has two. I'm going to go through, I don't know. We'll go through them one by one because there are some small differences. I mean, you know, the actual bylaws are attached to the report, as you probably noted, but I'll just quickly summarize for each area what is being proposed. And I also wanted to add here, we saw an opportunity through Bill 44 to try to harmonize the terminology we use for suites. Like if you're familiar with the various zoning bylaws, in some cases, for example, detached suites are called separate suite, which is area H. Sometimes they're called accessory dwelling unit, which is a few areas. Sometimes they're called small suite. Sometimes they're called something else, and I can't remember. There's even a fifth term. So what we're trying to do is just harmonize the terminology throughout all the bylaws, and that's what you see on this, the second and third bullet points on this bylaw concerning South Cowichan zoning that applies to areas A and C. We're also proposing to change the description of what up to this point was called single-family dwelling to single detached dwelling. That's a term that's been in the Area D zoning bylaws since, and Cheryl actually wrote them, how long ago was that? 9 years ago. And we're going to be adopting that terminology throughout the electoral areas because it works well with the detached suite and attached suite terminology. So what's different in the South Cowichan zoning bylaw is we're removing 20 definitions, adding 16. That doesn't mean we're just simplifying things. So, you know, you can see the amendments in the actual amendment bylaw if you want to take a look at them in detail. We're obviously removing the site area requirements and the owner occupancy and entrance requirements, which I noted previously. Of note here, suites would be permitted on Arbutus Ridge, even though the strata bylaws take precedence at the moment. So that would probably not be a popular measure. However, we are directed by the province to do it. And it's of particular note for Director Wilson, but
I shall be asking questions on that one.
okay. And finally, and I say it on this slide, and I think I repeat it on all of them, we're aware, or you're probably aware from previous reports, that the Agricultural Land Commission a couple of years ago opened up the possibility of having detached suites, like what is called accessory dwellings and so forth, in the ALR. And we've come under some demand at the front counter for, when are you going to update your bylaws to permit this and this sort of thing. And what I have proposed in these bylaws, even though strictly speaking it's not related to Bill 44, it's sort of peripherally related, I've proposed to add detached suite as a permitted use in the ALR, which of course would be subject to Agricultural Land Commission regulations. Now, if you could go to the next one, please, Ian, next slide. This one's specific to Shawnigan Lake. The number of definitions go up and down depending on which electoral area we're talking about based on the way their definitions are currently structured. Again, similar amendments to areas A and C. The terminology changes, the site area requirement and owner occupancy and entrance requirements are gone. One other change we're proposing to make in area B is to just update the reference to section 946 to section 514, which is basically the subdivision to provide a residence for a relative clause. We just have the wrong, the old section still listed in that bylaw, so we thought we'd update that at the same time. We're also proposing, and this is a matter that I think Chloe Boyle brought to this committee in respect of the problem with the suite covenant requirement in area B, where property is subdividable and people want to have a suite, they at the moment have to sign away their right to subdivide the property in order to get the suite, which doesn't make sense. And I have advised Chloe that we will be making the amendment that she was originally proposing to make as a singular amendment as part of this initiative to import language from one of the other bylaws that accomplishes the scenario she was trying to present of not requiring people to give away their right to subdivide if they get a suite, just that they would have to meet the current bylaw requirements after subdivision. And again, final point on this one is the same as all of them, a detached suite permitted for the first time in the ALR. Next slide, please, Ian. This is one of the two bylaws that Director Abbott enjoys. The marine zoning bylaw applies below the high water mark and in Cowichan Bay Village. Again, number of definitions are changed for the new terminology. Suite regulations are updated in accordance with Bill 44. This bylaw too, being an older one, has the incorrect reference to the subdivision to provide residence for relative clause. So that will be updated from 946 to 514. We also noticed some syntax problems with numbering and the references to a couple of zones, so we're just making a number of corrections in respect of that, and also the ALR change. Next slide, please. This is the Area D upland zoning bylaw, basically almost identical to the previous comment. One difference is that we're changing the terminology from proposing to change the terminology from semi-detached to duplex, just to coordinate with, to sort of harmonize across the bylaws, and also because semi-detached might be confused with attached suite or detached suite. So anyway, those are the proposed changes there. Now, next slide, please. We'll get into electoral area E. Essentially identical in essence to the previous ones. In almost every respect. Again, proposing to add detached suite in the ALR at the end of all of it. One more to area F, please. Essentially similar. One difference is the Poldy suite regulations had to be amended to comply with Bill 44 because in its present form, the Poldy zoning, which is a comprehensive development zone, permits suites, but only in 50% of the single-family dwellings. Bill 44 requires us to permit it in all of them, so we have to make that change. And again, ALR suites detached type would be permitted under this proposed bylaw. Next, area G, please. And this one's slightly unique. I alluded to it earlier. It'll have all the similar changes to the other bylaws, but with one twist. Detached suite is proposed to be permitted for the first time in Saltaire since the very early 2000s. It used to be in the bylaw, but was removed around 2002, I think it was. We're also proposing to permit detached suites in the ALR as well. And we also had to take care redeveloping or rewording, I guess, the density regulations in each zone to clearly permit one suite, whether detached or attached. There were some complications there. And then the next one is area H. Please, Ian. Thank you. Essentially, this is identical to previous comments. let me just see here. Again, like Area B, I guess this is the 5th bullet down, we're proposing to improve the covenant requirement in relation to suites so we don't impair subdivision if people want suites. So that change would be similar to what we're proposing in Area B. Detached suite permitted for the first time in the LR like the other areas. And we're also proposing to add a new general regulation which sort of adds some content that's already in the other bylaws concerning the Agricultural Land Commission's rules regarding suites, having, taking precedence basically over any particular rules that might be at play in the zoning. And then the final one is Area I. And again, similar idea to all the previous amendments. We had to change density regulations in all of the zones to reflect suites as dwelling units. So right now, for example, in Area I, and this is not unusual, we don't consider suites, if you look at the sequence of definitions, to be dwelling units, but obviously they're dwelling units. So we had to make a number of changes in various zones to reflect that. Area I does not have any ALR land, so there's no change in respect of that. And essentially that's it. If you could go to the last slide, the recommendation is there. One thing I wanted to say, there's sort of a timing issue based on the province's deadline of June 30th to get these compliance bylaws adopted in time for that deadline. We're also prohibited from holding a hearing in respect to Bill 44 amendments. You've also heard me say that some of these amendments, although peripherally related to Bill 44, are not actually required by Bill 44. And so in respect of that, that's why it says that we're recommending a public hearing be waived. You may wonder, why would we have to waive it if the province says we can't hold a hearing? The waiver is only in respect of those parts of the amendment bylaws that are not directly attributable to Bill 44. So that's the quick summary of the proposed changes, and if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer.
Director Acton, you're first.
Thank you. Sorry. They changed the software a little bit here the last couple days. Questions, but trying to understand. Well, first, I'd like to thank the province for just forcing us to go against some of our official community plans and for working so hard to fix the tenancy board or tenancy agreements. Maybe that could be something. I wonder if we could discuss that at the board level and maybe send a request letter to the province to actually work on improving some of the other parts than just forcing people to have suites here. But anyway, solve all the problems, I guess is what I'm saying. But my question for this is affect property owners on the lake have asked different things, like they might have a residence on the lakeside, but then they have land on the other side. So will this enable some of that to happen? And then also, what about in Area B, specifically Area B, we just allowed suites, but there was a clause in there that it couldn't be a certain distance from Shawnigan Lake or a certain distance from the Coxsila River. So now does that negate that specification?
Mr. Chair, thank you. To answer Director Acton's questions, the relatively recent amendments to the Area B zoning bylaw suite regulations in respect of distance from lake or Coxsila River will remain for the time being. What the proposals that you see in this report and recommendation does is it strictly complies with Bill 44. What the province is doing in its advice guide, which is something to be considered in the overall review of zoning that we're doing region-wide right now, is a number of other measures. They're encouraging us to look at all measures that can also bear on the ability to have or to not have suites, including things like setbacks. And I would read into that maybe setbacks from watercourses, building height, parking regulations, and so forth. And we will be giving some deeper consideration to that in the context of the project that Lauren Wright's managing on the comprehensive zoning bylaw. But at the moment, no, it wouldn't affect the waterfront owners essentially, unless they have land that goes beyond 60 meters, because that 60-meter requirement will remain in place for the foreseeable future, although it might change within a year or so.
So I have Director Nicholson, Martman, Wilson, me, and Deck. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. So I am a little confused about this whole thing. And my first question is probably pretty basic. So do I understand that you can have an attached suite anywhere that you got a house?
Mr. Chair, through you, the answer to Director Nicholson's question is no. The Bill 44 is very clear that its provisions only apply to properties whose really only principal use permitted is single-family dwelling. So an example might be, say, agricultural land reserve land. It permits farming as a principal use. So that technically is not required to comply with Bill 44. Or a forestry lot, for example, same thing. Having said that, the way that we're proposing to deal with the reality of the new interdictions on certain regulations is use the same standards, in respect of site area, in respect of where whether someone occupies a dwelling or not, throughout, just for simplicity, because otherwise it would get enormously complex on saying, okay, you're in the ALR, therefore Bill 44 doesn't apply, therefore you must occupy your property as a principal residence in order to have a suite, as opposed to the person across the street who doesn't have agricultural land. There may be in an R3 zone and they don't have to occupy their residence. So that in short is our reaction to what otherwise would be extraordinarily complicated administrative arrangements.
Okay, so basically I've got, this is going to be complicated for me. So we have many residential zones, so I can assume that all residential zones with houses could have a secondary suite. Now, can all residential zones can they also have a detached one, or is that size of a lot specific?
Okay, so to back up again, to comply with Bill 44, what we mandatorily had to do for all those properties that are in zones where single detached dwelling is the only main use permitted is to say there is no site area requirement. What staff is proposing here is to extend that no site area requirement to detached suites, which Bill 44 does not say we have to do. But again, for administrative simplicity, it just made sense to do it that way. You will only be permitted to have, if you're today allowed to have one suite on a property, following these amendments, you would still only be permitted to have one suite on a property.
So it's either or?
It's either or, yes. We will probably be discussing with this committee and APCs later on in the context of the comprehensive zoning bylaw, if we want to go any further in certain areas and maybe allow more than one suite, which, certainly the province has imposed upon municipalities in certain circumstances, but we're not going there. We're just doing frankly, the minimum to comply with Bill 44 at the time being in these amendment bylaws, plus some other amendments, which I pointed out.
No, it sounds like we're doing more than the minimum.
In respect to Bill 44, there's a bunch of other advice that they give us that we could have acted on, and I'm saying that we're not because it isn't mandatory. Yes, we're doing other things that are not required by Bill 44.
So you could have a very small site and you could have two homes on it with what we're proposing to do here. So I have, so where I'm going with this is I'm asked quite a lot about water and our ability to sustain the increased density in Electoral Area E with these new requirements. And it sounds to me like the ALR one, we don't need to do that, or we could do it specific to where there's enough water. And we also have these improvement districts, and I'm not clear that we understand how risky it would be to kind of assume that improvement districts can handle all this. I mean, we sort of have an idea where on the ones that we manage, I think. And then a lot of my area, I mean, I have one small water service. Yeah, so I am a little bit nervous about this, particularly the ALR one, because a lot of, yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I understand your concern. I think well, first of all, there's nothing we can do in terms of attached suites on that water question. I mean, it should take care of itself in the sense that there are other administrative protocols in place to, at the building permit stage to ensure there's an adequate supply of water. So if for example, they're on a well, they're going to have to, give evidence that there is sufficient water for both units. So I think that's the provincial approach is we just want zoning rules cleared out of the way. Other technical requirements in respect of water and sewer will be either developed on site specific to their individual needs, or if they're part of a larger system on the basis of whether there's, capacity in that system for additional expansion. The other thing I think the province mentions in their guide is that they expect that any changes, any new units in the wake of these amendments that they're requiring are not going to come in a sort of tidal wave of activity. They're going to trickle in, and I expect that's probably the case because it's still really expensive to build new buildings, although the province did announce a $40,000 loan program for suites, I think, recently, so that might sweeten the pot for some.
That'll be your final follow-up, but I can put you on the list again if you like.
Well, one quick follow-up is, the other thing I'm concerned about is we don't have this home plate requirement on ALR land yet, and it seems not like a very smart idea to allow additional buildings before we get that in place.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think it would be possible to develop a complementary regulation in respect of the detached suites being proposed to be permitted in the ALR to require a maximum distance from the single detached dwelling, as a sort of rough proxy for a home plate. In other words, you can't be 250 meters away. You can't even maybe be more than 50 meters away from the principal home, or whatever the distance is. I know staff's working on a home plate concept, and it's extraordinarily complicated in the sense that a lot of so-called home plates exist now which wouldn't conform to any proposed regulation. So having a proximity requirement for the suite might be one way of dealing with that issue. And actually, I recall before Director McClinton was the director there, I remember going to the area GAPC once when they were talking about maybe reintroducing detached suites, and one of them came up with the idea of maybe there should be a maximum distance that the detached suite can be away from the home. And the angle they were looking at wasn't sort of preserving farmland. It was more like if it's closer to the home and they're creating a disturbance and so forth, that whoever's occupying the main dwelling will sort of self-enforce reasonable behavior. So yeah, I should hasten to add the draft bylaws you see attached are still subject to legal review, and we're open to taking any technical improvements to them that would come out of this committee or from legal or anyone who's reviewing them right now.
Director Martin, Mr. McDonald, whoever you are, yes.
Maybe I could further comment on the water requirements. So through building code and building permits, if there's no sprinklers in the home, there's no flow requirement. So I'm aware of some permits we issued where there was half a gallon a minute. Also with improvement districts, actually I think it was Mill Bay, I think it was one that wasn't ours phoned me one day saying that there were no more connections. So, and it was for a suite that we had issued so we'd issued a permit for a suite. So that's where we will run into some challenges is through those improvement districts. But as far as it goes for somebody that's on a well, as long as they have water, we don't have a requirement around the actual flow.
Thank you. Director Martman.
Oh, the devils are in the details, aren't they? You know, I want to go back to the idea that, we're in a position where I don't think we can say no. At least that's a question.
Mr. Chair, you may say no to elements of these bylaws that are not required to comply with Bill 44. With respect to Bill 44, I would advise you not to say no, because if you do, there could be sanctions imposed.
Fair enough. So I don't want to burn up all my questions, so that's a freebie? Okay, so I want to sort of focus, I think it's not like an omnibus in a way that, sort of thrown in some housekeeping pieces here that go along with the stretches in the back. Sorry, I got distracted. But I don't have a problem with the housekeeping piece, but I do, want to try to explore the idea of the APC, and also, are we introducing things? I think Director Nicholson is mentioning that I would like to, that to me is like a public hearing, getting advice from, on farmland from farmers about what we're doing around if it's a home plate or whatever thing like that. So that's just observation on that. The questions I have around, when I looked at all through the different bylaws, one of the things in the detail it talks about are actually the size of each of the, whether it's an attached suite or a attached or detached suite. Every area seems to have a different sort of size that's permitted. And I'm curious about, is that just sort of allowing continuity, or why is that in place? And I have a follow-up.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, Director Martman. Yeah, to my recollection, we haven't proposed changing the floor area limits for the suites that are in place in the bylaws today. It's obviously something that we want to take a deeper look at when we're doing the new comprehensive zoning bylaw to see if maybe we should, consider harmonizing this throughout the 9 electoral areas. The differences are relatively minor for the most part. I think the smallest suite that I can recall in any of the zones is like 60 square meters, and the largest is 95, I believe, in area F. So there's a bit of a difference, but they're not monstrously different. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it does. I think it's just that I've had questions from my community already about, well, why is it left at 90 for a detached suite in area H, and why couldn't it be something more, or does that be a variance? So, I mean, those things will come out, I think, over time. But the other question I have is, we've had many applications come forward to talk about the footprint on a property of, where you're covering so much of the land. So is that being adjusted as well then? Because obviously some people are maxed out already for their footprint, and interested on how that may be impacted.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Director Martman. I think there are no changes proposed to the parcel coverage requirements in any of the zones in relation to Bill 44. There's ample advice in the Bill 44 policy document asking us, when we have more time, I presume, to take a deeper look into that to make sure we don't have other regulations, some of which I mentioned earlier, setbacks, building height, things like that, that are de facto interdictions of suites, despite saying, yeah, they're permitted, but by the way, you're already at 50% lot coverage, you can't go any higher, or 30, or whatever the number is. So that's something, again, that we'll be looking at when the new comprehensive zoning bylaws under development. Clearly, the smaller the parcel gets, the harder it's going to be to fit everything on it under current rules. So what could happen in theory is, say, July 1st or whatever, when we're compliant with Bill 44, someone with a really small lot might come forward and say, with the front counter, I can do a suite now, that's great, there's no site area requirement. And we say, actually, like I just said, you're already at 32%, your maximum coverage is 30, so you're going to need a variance, and that would have to come before this committee. The Bill 44 language is pretty blunt, that the zoning rules have to permit the use, and then it gives a bunch of advice in respect of other regulations that might somewhat claw back that use. And we'd have to cross that bridge when we get to it in terms of, dealing with a development variance application for that or something like that. The larger the lots are, the less of an issue that generally is. Of course, farmland being, it's not lot coverage per se. Usually it's just like how much land's being set aside for uses other than farming, and that's another important issue. So sort of at the two ends of the spectrum, there are issues related to that.
Ms. Churl, did you want to jump up and provide some sage advice?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple of comments. One, just a historical reference, I guess. There was previously a requirement in the building code that secondary suites be no larger than 90 square meters. And so that's why in zoning bylaws, you see a lot of reference to suites being no longer larger than 90 square meters or 900 square feet. That provision has now been removed from the BC building code, so suites can be larger. So that option is available to this committee to discuss as you move through the development of the comprehensive zoning bylaw. My other comment was in regards to water, which is absolutely a significant issue within this region. And there has been some discussion internally about the ability to require on-site water collection facilities, essentially rainwater collection facilities. And that is something that staff can investigate. And we can look at that in terms of potentially accompanying the changes to meet the Bill 44 requirements or not. But that is something that we can, with your direction, investigate for this committee's information.
You good? Or you have another?
I would follow up and say absolutely. For us, and there's many areas in Area H and right across the Cowichan Valley that rainwater harvesting and that is, one can't go without the other, or it would be very, very difficult. So I would appreciate knowing that it could go along with the report.
Thank you. Director Wilson, myself, and Director Dick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse my ignorance, Mike. What's a home plate? It's a new one on me, that one.
Home plate, well, in baseball, no.
Yeah,
It's
I know that
it's
one.
a term that the Agricultural Land Commission has been using for some time to describe a portion of an ALR property that is used for residential or residential-related uses that, such as outbuildings, garages, workshops that are not agricultural related, because they see those uses as being kind of intrusions into the ability to farm land.
Okay.
And insofar as there's generally no regulations specifying, in our zoning bylaws that your workshop or whatever can't be 180 meters or in the middle of a field or things like that. I mean, having said that, there are some things that attenuate that tendency, like development permit area requirements, for example. But so they're trying to come up with an idea of, what is a suitable area of land, maybe 2,000 square meters or something like that, where all of the residential non-farming uses should be ideally located.
Yeah.
The challenge in implementing it is, as I noted earlier, there are lots of cases out there where people can't comply, as their buildings already are with a home plate requirement. And so we're going to have to give some deep thought to that as to how to try to, maybe not make all those legal non-conforming. So that's why the home plate is. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. And while we're on the ALR, my understanding was that the previous to Bill 44 coming in, there was a limitation to a accessory building or, let's say, a secondary residence of 100 square meters. Is that still the case, or how does this new thing change any of that? Or was that my understanding not correct?
Mr. Chair, yeah, I think it's got a strong root in reality. I believe the Agricultural Land Commission, when they, I think it was roughly 2 years ago, implemented a new rule saying that detached suites were now going to be permitted. They enacted some maximum floor area requirements, which I think are slightly larger than most of ours. I can't remember if they're over 100 square meters or not. So.
Okay. Good.
Yes.
And one final one on the subject of Arbutus Ridge. What takes precedence here? And there's the problem that it's unique I think in the whole of the CVRD, and there are some huge residences up there, which are basically empty. But how does this compare? How does Bill 44 now align, if you like, with any strata bylaw?
Mr. Chair, through you, the answer to that question is, at the moment, the strata bylaws, insofar as they may not permit suites, would take precedence. So the fact that we would be required to enable them doesn't mean that the strata corporation at this time is going to be required to enable them too. I think, though, the province has said something to the effect that they're taking a deeper look at the Strata Property Act to see whether they do need to make changes in that regard. But any suggestion of what those changes might be, it would be speculative, so we
Nothing
don't
so
really
far,
know.
okay, good.
Yeah.
And just a last comment, I think it would be, I might be having a word with engineering on the water supplies and the sewage treatment systems that they got there, which are pretty good, pretty big. Thank you.
So, a couple of things. At the Electoral Area Forum, there were a number of side conversations. One, there were some staff there, but I also had an opportunity to speak to the president of UBCM, who is hearing it loud and clear that all the things that the province is doing around increasing rental stock availability and the likes, it's hemmed in by the failures of the Residential Tenancy Act, and that there are so many challenges with people taking on long-term rentals that they are simply leaving perfectly good units empty because they don't want to enter into that business model. So I can tell you that any letter that we could recommend to the board, that there be resources applied to the residential tenancy branch, that the hearings be expedited, that all of that be done, would be an excellent suggestion for us to send through from the board to the provincial government. If I didn't mention, and Mike alluded to it, the $40,000 program for modifying your home to another dwelling unit or an attached unit would be $40,000 matching loan. So if you were to do an $80,000 renovation to your property to create a dwelling unit, if you maintain that at 30% below market rates for a period of 5 years, the $40,000 would be forgivable. So it's essentially a grant, which is a pretty darn good deal. I gather there wasn't the uptake that they thought they would when they announced it just for municipalities, so they've now opened the door to, this is an interesting wrinkle. Thank goodness we have building inspection, because those jurisdictions that don't have building inspection aren't eligible for the program, because there's no way to prove that a properly built renovation was done. So that's kind of an interesting aspect. And the last thing that
Mr. Chair, can I write, you're going through so many things. I wanted to second your recommendation about the Residential Tenancy Act.
We have other matters on the floor, and we can do that in a moment. So the last thing that I just want to mention, it was made very clear at the Electoral Area Forum, is we kind of dodged a bullet to a certain extent in that a lot of the regulations that have been announced recently that apply to municipalities don't all apply to us. We've been given a suite of things that must be done, but the message was clear. We're going to build more housing everywhere. And if we are wise, we will not only take the money, but we will comply with what is being ordered from the province, and we will open ourselves open for business for creating these units. And they are wanting folks to buy into this willingly and not drag our heels. And so the sooner we can get into the implementation of this and work out the bugs and the challenges around water and other issues, the sooner we can get those things tackled. So I'll leave it at that. We still got to get to the resolution here, Director Acton. I've got Director Deck, Director Nicholson, and I can come back to you for a resolution after we consider the recommendation from staff. Director Deck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question and then a comment. And my question is, the local area plans and the official community plans, will they be bumping up against some of the regulations that the government has imposed?
Mr. Chair, through you, the answer to Director Deck is yes, that there's a complementary requirement in Bill 44 that official community plans and related documents be updated in a way that complements the ordered changes in respective zoning. So, for example, there's the fact that suites are now permitted and so forth. If there was any policy to the contrary in certain designations in the draft plan, for example, that could not happen. And essentially the official community plans in force in all of the communities throughout BC are supposed to comply fully with Bill 44 at the end of 2025. So they have a fair bit more time. That sounds like a long time, but you know, it comes really fast, and Coralie and her staff have a heck of a lot on their plate, so this is just one more thing being added to it. Mm-hmm. So to put a finer point on it, to the extent that any OCP today says you can't have a suite unless you have a certain site area in policy, it doesn't have legal effect, and it must be gone by the end of 2025, either by adoption of a new MOCP or by amendment to the current OCP.
Thank you. And my comment is about water sustainability in this decision-making process. So when there's one residence or one resident, or how can I put this? Anyway, the pressure's on wells, aquifers are already being experienced. So even if a dwelling has enough water, or appears to have enough water for two dwellings or two families even, my worry is that the water will then be reduced in half, basically, as the pressures on wells and aquifers increase, and the droughts and so forth. So I'm just, I'm wondering how that's going to work. How far in the future do we know how the water's going to last, and how that, you understand what I'm asking. Thank you. I think.
Mr. Chair, I believe that was a question. May I answer?
Yes.
Thanks.
That might have been my comment, but.
Well, no, it was sort of a comment, but it morphed into a question, but that's understandable. There are clauses in the zoning bylaws right now, and if they aren't there now, they will be through these amendment bylaws that require that the provincial approvals for both waste management and water, whatever those constitute, have to be dealt with. So what does that mean in practice? Actually, I'm not 100% sure. Does every residential owner have a well license? I don't think so. I mean, that's pretty clear. Some farmers in the Quoxila don't have it, and there's probably lots of homes that don't. Some draw water from Shawnigan Lake. Others, without licenses, I assume. I think, it might be a challenge in practice to implement Bill 44 in the least well-serviced areas. Let's just leave it at that. And the province has required us to make the amendment. How they're going to actually roll out in those edge case situations, I don't actually know at this point. But I think the province considers that the other checks and balances in the provincial approvals for water and sewer may be adequate for that. And if they aren't, they're going to probably have to refine it in some way. We have our role in it, but as Ian says, it's not like a huge role. Like, we don't have direct control over water resources, for example, in most cases.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, just to review, we've got Director Abbott, who hasn't spoken yet, Director Nicholson, Martman, and it would be really nice to get to the recommended resolution sooner than later. So, Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. Through to Mike. Just for clarity and emphasis, did I hear you say that residency, owner residency is not a requirement for any of these changes?
Mr. Chair, yes, you heard me correctly. To be clear, though, this is in respect to Bill 44, not Bill 35, which is short-term rental. That's a whole other kettle of fish. Yeah, we do have some bylaws, I can't remember whether Area D is one or two of them, that do require the owner to reside on the same property where a suite exists. That is now, has to be gone by Bill 44. Now, someone has to be living there to, like living, I don't mean short-term renting. So we should ensure that that is the case, but it doesn't have to be the owner, and we're not allowed to specify that anymore.
Director Nicholson, then Martman.
I'm feeling very uncomfortable with the not doing anything more than we have to at this point until we've done more work on our modernization. I am wondering how all this comes together. This is a lot of work going through making changes to individual bylaws. So why are we not moving to harmonize, now that we have a harmonized OCP, why do we not move to harmonize the zoning bylaw so that then we can start fixing a lot of this stuff in an incremental way? Because I feel like we're wasting a lot of time on, and and I just think there's so many important things that we need to fix in our zoning bylaw.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I don't disagree with you. In fact, going way back to when the idea of doing, harmonized OCP and zoning was first mooted, my first thought was, let's do the zoning first, get the regulations in line and then do the policy work afterwards. Didn't play out that way. I mean, this very report here is evidence of the extra work that comes in maintaining 8 or 9 bylaws instead of 1. Having said that, I am completely open to altering the draft bylaws that are attached, specifically the one for Area E. If you don't want to proceed with the ALR measure in there or something else that's not mandatory under Bill 44, just say so. And that can be added to any resolution this committee makes, and I'll make the change. It's not a problem. We were just trying to move a few items forward that were kind of peripherally related to Bill 44 that we'd been hearing about, but sometimes sober second thought is a good idea too. So I would say that to any director who's got an element in the proposed amendments that they're not comfortable with. Just let us know about it, and we can make that change.
Okay, so in addition to the water issue, which I think is really important to get right, and so I'm not keen on the ALR. I also think we don't want to miss an opportunity to go to our APCs, set up an agriculture advisory commission and talk to them about the agricultural side of things, because I think it's an opportunity to really connect with the community on some important issues and sort of lay the groundwork for changes that we're going to see in our community as we move forward. So I would, for my area, I would definitely like to just do the minimum and then talk to people and work through some of the technical stuff on the water.
Duly noted, and for Patrick, who is listening to this, I don't know how that has to manifest in any resolution, but I've certainly made notes about it, so I can definitely do.
Well, and I think, and I don't think we've got Ms. Sherolf here anymore, but she's going to, you probably should hear this, because it's very clear to me that we're kind of doing two or three different things at once here. And I hear what Director Nicholson's saying is, we've already set a course, and your department has a work plan, and we're doing OCPs and LAPs currently right now. We're not doing zoning, or we're beginning to do zoning. But we also have the time pressure of the Bill 44 stuff has to be done. So I get if there's a desire to exclude the peripheral items that staff are looking to correct in this work, sure, makes sense. I'm just, concerned on a couple of fronts in that we have to get this done, and resourcing to, embark on, the other work that's anticipated to be done with this, if we're going to start looking at water and the agriculture and the likes. I don't know if that was anticipated by the general manager, and whether or not we've actually put adequate resources in the 2024 budget to be able to embark on this vein of work. So any thoughts on that?
I could start if you want. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, no, you're in pain. That's not good. First of all, we were trying to maybe kill two birds with one stone in respect to some of the other stuff. As I say, it is Bill 44 related, but not mandated by it. Right. It would be easy to remove all of it from every one of the bylaws, and then I would submit at this point, just defer consideration of all the other stuff until we get into the comprehensive zoning bylaw. That's easily done too. Having said that, some of the stuff is literally housekeeping, like incorrectly numbered sections, referring to the wrong section of the act, things like that. I'd prefer not to get rid of those things because they're essentially monster typo corrections. And as I say, this can be a la carte from my perspective, at least. I have no problem changing any one of the 9 bylaws in accordance with whatever this committee wants to do today, and we will do it, and it'll be done by next week.
Before you answer, Mr. Rolfe, so like if we can actually do what Mr. Tippett is saying, where we can do the a la carte, pull out those items that are of interest to the directors that aren't the numbering corrections and the like, that would be amazing, and it would be great if we could perhaps pass a resolution that excluded the things that we've talked about, so that could proceed forward. And are you saying that you could get a list of those things that would be excluded so that it could be taken out by the time this appears before the board, and they would be excluded in the recommendation that would go forward?
Certainly, yeah. The bylaws right now are out for legal review with Bill Buholzer and in their current form. And certainly before, like when we get back his comments, we can make final changes, and they won't appear on a board agenda for readings before all of those changes would be made. So to be clear, what I guess in Director Nicholson's case, what I'm hearing is the detached suite in the ALR should not be part of the Area E Amendment bylaw, and possibly also the removal of the site area requirement and any other restrictions in respect of detached suites, in other parts of Area E also come out, because they're not Bill 44 related, but the other stuff, insofar as it does typo correction, stays in. So yeah, I think that's true for all of the electoral areas. It's those 2 issues mainly, the ALR detached suites and applying the same Bill 44 type measures to detached suites as we are for attached suites, attached being mandatory, detached being optional. And the unique Area G case of not even permitting detached suites except on a couple of spot zone properties right now.
Okay. Mr. Rolfe?
Thanks, Mike. Through you, Mr. Chair. So pre-Bill 44, we had sort of extensive discussions about how to advance the comprehensive zoning bylaw, recognizing that there's also an MOCP process going on and a local area plan process going on. In a perfect world, you have, an updated OCP, updated local area plans, and then the zoning falls out of that. We implement the policies and the OCP and the local area plans through the zoning. What the provincial mandate has sort of resulted in is a sort of kind of throwing that out in some ways, and being forced to introduce regulations. And so we're trying to do the best that we can with what we've been told to do. And so we have a couple of options, and as Mike said, we can either advance the bare minimum of the Bill 44 requirements now to meet our deadline by the middle of June, or 2024, end of June. or we can try to tidy some other things up as well. We do have prior board direction around implementing the recommendations of the Upland Agricultural Report, which talked about allowing for additional housing options within the ALR. So that was, the part of what has been recommended to you is implementing that direction. If it's the will of this body that not happen now, that is absolutely fine. We can set that aside. And then in terms of the sort of the architecture of the bylaw, you have now, you do actually have a zoning bylaw that does apply to all electoral areas now, and that is the zoning bylaw that contains all of the development permit area guidelines. So it is possible to use that as a vehicle for creating the comprehensive zoning bylaw, and we could use that as a place to house the new regulations that would be applicable to suites if you wanted to sort of pull them out of the old bylaws and put them in a new place in one bylaw. So that's another option. It's just a mechanical thing. Mike would probably love to talk about that.
I would. Anne is correct technically, but I would just say there are some complications about removing that part of it, because if you're leaving the single family, I shouldn't say that, single detached dwellings in the main zoning bylaw, and then there's another zoning bylaw, like there's a crossover between the two that would be really difficult to administer if they're in separate bylaws. I mean, I understand though it's almost like having a clean room in your house. The rest of it is a total mess, and you want to put this new furniture in the clean room. I get it, but I think it's a bit more complicated.
Just took a glimpse into my house. Okay. The other sort of comment I wanted to make was around, wanting to do this in a way that's sort of, that allows us to do meaningful public consultation. So it's really hard to do that when, the province has said, this is what you shall do. We can't really do meaningful consultation on that because we've been told what to do. And so what we hear back isn't necessarily going to be actionable. But there are pieces that, Mike has introduced that are things that we can consult with our APCs or the public on that are, outside of the Bill 44 framework, and that includes the, the ALR detached suite provisions, the size of units, the idea about water collection systems. So there are some things that we could, explore with community. What this body needs to decide is, how much time do you want to take? Because, sort of time is sort of, and consultation, they go together, right? So we can do more consultation, it'll take more time. Less consultation generally takes less time. So that's, and we're really, we'll do as we're directed. We want to do the best job that we can do for you, and so understanding what your priorities are in terms of introducing this legislation, and then other aspects of housing, we'll take direction from you.
So where I'm sitting right now is I definitely am fading fast and clearly concerned about the quality of our decision-making at this point. So I think we've had some pretty good direction for Director Nicholson's suggestions and the like, that we can proceed on the section or the Bill 44 stuff. I think that we need to have a good flow chart produced to show us how we would proceed on these other items. So that's really important. So what I'm trying to do is get to a recommendation that we can put forward today that won't delay the Bill 44 stuff and from us meeting our deadlines. So I just put that out there, and that we need to have a resolution from today that's something that we could send forward. I can tell you right now, I've got on my list directors Martman, McClinton, and Wilson, and hopefully we can get to some sort of wrap up to this. Were you on there too? We're kind of under time pressure on the Bill 44 stuff. So I'll go to Director McClinton first.
I'd like to test the floor. I'd like to move the recommendation. And if I can speak to it.
Hang on just a second, I'm being consulted with. Okay, so though I've just had advice that we can move forward with the resolution that has just been put on the floor, and that I think that there might be time for you to consult with specific directors on other items that would come out before we go to the board. Correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, no, but that's good enough, so let's stop with that, so.
Yeah.
Director McClinton.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chair. I've been sitting here patiently ready to speak about it. I think about all the issues that we talk about that are important to us, and then how does housing always end up being last? I just want to thank you, Mr. Tippett, for this very thoughtful and comprehensive plan that you've put forward. I think, excuse me, I think it's tremendous. I think it strikes a very good balance between what we must do and simplifying many of our complex problems or issues between the different zoning. I think it's tremendous. Just because you are permitted to perhaps have a secondary suite or a detached suite doesn't mean you're going to build one. It's simply giving people the freedom and the ability to do what's best with their property, whether they're on ALR or not. I think this is a very thoughtful piece that you put forward, and I'm enthusiastically supporting it.
Director Martman.
Thank you. Maybe not quite as enthusiastic, but understanding we have some practical issues to deal with here. And I am for, the idea that we put forward something in this resolution. I think this is what is intended, to meet the minimum and to also have some housekeeping pieces in there. And I would talk to you about Area H, because anytime I circumvent the APC in my area, or circumvent a process where the community can be involved, I hear it. And I also think that involvement, and while it does slow things down, is really the way to build trust and to build that connection. And I think we'll need that going forward, because when this comes forward, we're going to lose some trust. People are going to say, you made all those changes, why didn't you just stand up and say no? And anyways. So I look forward to having a chat with you afterwards about what that might look like.
Director.
Can we?
What?
Sorry.
Do you want to go back on the list?
Well, I mean, are we speaking to the motion on the floor?
We are.
Okay.
Yep. I've got Director Wilson, then Acton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I am enthusiastic about it. Mr. Tippett has done a great job. Jesse's already articulated that, and I'm in complete agreement with what he says there. I'm also impressed with the ability to give answers, or even try to give answers to some very convoluted questions. Thank you. You've done well. I will fully support the recommendation on the floor.
Thank you. Go to Director Acton.
I think you're calling on me for the next resolution.
You're right. Director McClinton to close.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Director Nicholson to close. Final speaker.
Well, I can't support this motion. I think it would be extraordinarily short-sighted, given the community's concern about water. And I'm all for housing, but let's make sure we can provide the services for it. So we have to do the minimum. We don't need to do the extra. And housekeeping, I'm good with. Let's do the housekeeping, of course. But this does not seem to me to be, a good move.
Ready to test the House? Call the question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries. We are now, Mr. Robbins, next we're on item number 9. No unfinished business, no new business.
Nobody here for question period. Move you, there is no closed session. So adjournment.
Move. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you, everyone, for a very trying day that was Could have been much worse. And look at you.
Good
you got the
job.
first one under
Good
your
night,
belt.
everyone.
Good night.